the accounts of the Sea People. Though there were many ancient civilizations that had existed during the 12th century BC, suddenly and quite unexpectedly nearly every civilization was wiped from the face of the earth except the cities of Egypt. This phenomenon was recorded as the Late Bronze Age collapse that soon bled into the early Greek Dark Ages as only small villages of humanity survived this sudden catastrophe. For many decades, the cause of such an occurrence had widely been unknown and shrouded in mystery. That was until the ancient language of the Egyptian hieroglyphics had been decoded and allowed us to read the historical records captured at the time by the last standing ancient civilization. This record has led to countless theories and endless debate amongst Egyptologists, classic historians, and archaeologists since its findings. By the historical accounts of the ancient Egyptians, armies of what had been referred to at the time as Sea People attacked and demolished the cities of man. In fact, the descriptions of the armies of the Sea People describe monsters and giants coming from the oceans and waging war against all of civilization. The reasoning for why this sudden onslaught had occurred has yet to be better understood. But what is all the more surprising is the vast conspiracy surrounding the events. Accounts continue of the Egyptians attempting to track the source of the beasts that appeared humanoid in nature and found hundreds of footprints leaving and coming from the beaches of the Mediterranean Sea. Today, after uncovering vast art depicting the battles, documents detailing the events, and further evidence of war and tactics used against the destroyed and forgotten civilizations of the past, the proof of the account of the Sea People appears to be overwhelming in nature. The events are so overwhelming that the discussions surrounding the event in the scientific community has been completely shut down, and further theories or attempts at uncovering the truth are treated with both disdain and ridicule. Regardless of this ridicule, however, many researchers continue to attempt to understand the mysteries of the Sea People and remain restless in their pursuits. Perhaps one day we will better understand whether these accounts are of mythology or true history. Until then, the accounts of the Sea People are shrouded in creepy events and terrifying mysteries. At the end of 2017, the United States Department of Defense began their subtle declassification processes by slowly declassifying a collection of military documents and research information to the general public. Usually, these declassification processes are fraught with financial information, technical documents, and references to training programs, government budgets, assistance with other nations, or other basic procedures, which do not hold any significant importance outside of technical military information. However, it became apparent very quickly to members amongst the alien community that the declassified files coming from the Pentagon were more than just research and technical information. The files that were slowly being declassified over the course of the previous year and this year detailed information regarding a clandestine team of researchers tasked with gathering information relative to unidentified flying objects and strange extraterrestrial sightings. So today we will be going over the secret Pentagon files along with the program's findings and significant information discovered. Information regarding the program. Back in 2007, the Department of Defense began developing a UFO research program tasked with gathering information regarding unidentified flying objects and conducting research as to the observed aircrafts, their origin, and their technological prowess. The research group was quickly budgeted with $22 million in support and a team comprising of military intelligence officials, researchers, and the highest levels of security clearance. The program itself went by the name ADIP, which stood for the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, and was given the primary objective of identifying these unidentified flying objects as whether or not they are potential threats to national security. It did not take long for the ADIP team to gather a wide variety of strange sighting reports made by pilots from across the country, including associated data like camera footage and radar information, while attempting to match these sightings with known international aircraft signatures. Expecting to find explanations to these craft and their origin rather after the gathered data was compiled, it became rather obvious that this would not be the case. In fact, many of the researchers involved in the program regarded these UFO sightings and craft as having no earthly origin and displaying behavior that could not be explained. This could very well be the closest the Department of Defense will ever come to admitting the viability of extraterrestrial craft without directly saying it. The crafts discovered, although the program has currently been discontinued, which is the main cause for the declassification of the files. The chief of the UFO program still heavily believes in the importance of the study and the viability of his team to continue their research and gather information regarding issues of national security. The program's chief military intelligence official claimed that not only did these craft exhibit behaviors that appeared to defy the very laws of aviation, but that these crafts were found to be 100% not man-made and were out of scope of human capabilities. His reasoning for this claim was that the crafts investigated demonstrated hypersonic capabilities that were described as being far beyond the scope that is physically tolerable by a human being, of whom would experience a high amount of Gs to the point that would either be fatal or seriously wound them. This meant that whoever or whatever was piloting these aircrafts appeared to be non-human. Not only this, but the technical developments of the craft also made it very apparent that the creation of these unidentified flying objects were vastly superior to anything man-made. Luis Elizondo describes in one of his many reports regarding the subject matter as saying, quote, "There is a lot we really don't know. We have identified anomalous craft that does not have any obvious flight surfaces, forms of propulsion and maneuvering in ways that include extreme maneuverability beyond the healthy G-forces of anything biological, low observability and positive lift. These aircraft, we'll call them aircraft, display capabilities not in the US arsenal or any other militaries. Not only does this help supply overwhelming, legitimate proof, research and development made into the UFO community, but demonstrates that the evidence regarding extraterrestrial life is both obvious and abundant amongst intelligence officials as well as legitimate in all regard. The main establishment of the secret UFO program and the objective of the UFO researchers involved in the program was to determine whether or not these unidentified flying objects were an issue of national security or posed a threat to the safety of US citizens and the US government. It was originally believed that these craft could have been aircraft developed by different militaries around the world and, given their ability to vanish off of radar detection, could have been a variation on developments for stealth bombers or stealth aircraft. This meant that the number one task in regards to the UFO files was to determine the purpose of the crafts and their origin as to determine whether or not these craft posed a threat. After it became fairly obvious the unidentified flying objects were not man-made, the issue at hand became increasingly complex. The methods used to determine whether or not these craft were threats to national security circled around where these craft were spotted, the technology the craft used, and its ability to be used in warfare. Using these simple metrics, it became apparent to the researchers that not only were these unidentified flying objects a threat, but they demonstrated technological prowess that could not be matched if ever a fight played out, were at random locations across the country. A small minority of these craft were found located near US nuclear missile bases, flying through restricted airspace and hovering close to residential locations. It appeared that wherever these craft wanted to go, they could easily find their way to their targeted location regardless of measures taken to restrict airspace. Whenever these craft were intercepted by military jets, would either take off at speeds that were vastly superior to the state-of-the-art jets, or would slowly fade away and disappear entirely. This meant that there was no way to intercept these craft or even to engage in a dogfight if the event was necessary. Essentially, it was determined that not only were these craft an obvious threat to national security, but that we are completely powerless to stop them from performing any action. This finding urges the Department of Defense to treat the existence of these craft not as random sightings and made-up accounts, but rather as genuine worries and threats that must be actively defended against and analyzed in attempts to reverse engineer the mechanisms behind the craft and to devise ways to deactivate them and prepare for an eventual confrontation with the unidentified crafts, which seems to be a key piece of intelligence that could have greatly influenced the current US president's decision to add a sixth branch to its armed forces, known as the Space Force. Most notable case in the research files, what seems to be the main story of focus regarding the Pentagon's UFO project, has to do with the recently declassified witness report of an unidentified flying object and its anomalous behavior. The report centers around a Navy pilot's first-hand account after he was sent to investigate a mysterious aircraft that suddenly appeared on radar at an altitude of 80,000 feet. When the Navy pilot slowly approached the aircraft, it began to descend rapidly within a few seconds to an altitude of 20,000 feet and then stopped abruptly before fading off of the radar and disappearing completely, almost as if it was fading from existence. Normally, witness reports are not all that exciting to UFO researchers. However, it appears that the research group had recovered the recorded footage from the Navy pilot's aircraft that showed in high detail the craft's shape, its extraordinary movements, and ability to abruptly vanish from sight. What makes the footage and the account all the more incredible is that Elizondo used this footage to confirm the craft's non-nationality, given that not only did it not have any designs similar to any current aircraft today, but that it seemed completely unreplicable with current technologies. This footage and many others can be found when searching up the Pentagon's secret UFO files, along with other accounts, pieces of evidence, and incredible findings made by that adept. Declassification of the project with all of this acknowledgement of unidentified craft, their strange abilities, and the potential for extraterrestrial life. It might appear that the Department of Defense and higher intelligence officials might be slowly coming to the consensus of total disclosure regarding the viability of alien contact and classified government projects. However, that could not be further from the case. According to Nate Jones, the director of the Freedom of Information Act, he claims that the footage shown and provided was never officially declassified, and that there are potentially many files that are still yet to be declassified that have not gone through the proper channels. In fact, it almost appears to be that the initial cause for the declassification of certifiles to begin with was due to a potential leak of information that originated from inside the Pentagon, as Nate Jones clarifies that, quote, like these weren't released through any proper DoD declassification channels when referring to the shown footage and declassified reports. The Department of Defense has also taken a stand by saying the official who is authorized to release this video on behalf of the Department of Defense did not approve the release of this video. The Pentagon is also referencing a study made back in the 1950s by the Central Intelligence Agency's Psychological Strategy Board, of which concluded that the public's potential reaction to UFOs could cause an instance of mass hysteria, which constituted a national security threat. This could very well mean that we are decades away from a full disclosure of the project and other secret Pentagon UFO files. For those who study the enigmatic figures of history, of whom have worked tirelessly to help shape our world, then you will know that there is no man out there who fits this description better than the late Serbian-Croatian inventor Mr. Nikola Tesla. Essentially forming the basis of the modern world, Nikola Tesla single-handedly helped to plunge us into the new millennium, and it appears that history has almost completely forgotten about him. Some still being discovered even to this day in old patent offices. So today, we will be talking about the enigmatic creator and his selfless contributions to the world. Born in the small Serbian village Smiljan, young Nikola Tesla had big dreams regarding electricity and his vision of a better and quite literally a brighter future for humanity. In 1884, Tesla immigrated to the United States and immediately began his work at an overcrowded shop, struggling to maintain the task of building a large electric utility in Manhattan's Lower East Side. It was this work experience that helped to elevate Tesla into his future, as he became obsessed with his own work, experiments, and theories. Tesla began believing in an old alchemical mysticism known as the ether. He would talk about it for length and believed that he could tap into it and use its abilities to create a future in which magical devices could exist and change the landscape and powers of humanity overall. This led to a popular quote that many people reference today, in which Nikola Tesla states, "When wireless is perfectly applied, the whole Earth will be converted into a huge brain," which in fact it is, all things being particles of a real and rhythmic whole. We shall be able to communicate with one another instantly, irrespective of distance. Not only this, but we shall see and hear one another as perfectly as though we were face to face, despite intervening distances of thousands of miles, and the instruments through which we shall be able to do this will fit in a vest pocket. With such a grandiose promise, it begged many to ask the great Nikola Tesla the most obvious question: what is the ether? Nikola Tesla believed the ether to be an invisible form of energy. He regarded it as essentially the universe, claiming everything in creation to be nothing more than energy, wave, and frequency. In some weird way, he was right. The advancements of quantum mechanics and the scientific golden age had yet to be made, way before even the first concepts of virtual particles became known to modern-day physicists. The oscillations of the particles are known to essentially make up everything. Even the work made by Albert Einstein would prove that all matter was merely energy. It appeared that in his work and in his lectures, Nikola Tesla was well aware of this fact and sought to harness this potential power. He would claim that he believed that not only could he discover this frequency, but that he could tap into it and use it as the means to wirelessly transmit energy, communicate over vast distances, and even use it to control various mechanisms and automata. He would go on to prove this theory rather quickly with his invention of remote control. Regarded as the world's first drone, Nikola Tesla constructed a small mechanical boat and built a wireless transmitter inside of the device that could tap into a specific frequency of what he called the ether that we now know in the modern day as the electromagnetic spectrum or more, specifically radio waves. He then built a remote control device that could manipulate the boat and cause it to move around and float on the water as if it were a fully manned crew. To demonstrate his creation, Nikola Tesla took his boat out to the electrical exhibition in 1898 and made a powerful demonstration that drew a crowd from all around. He placed the boat into a nearby pond and told the crowd that the boat had a bunch of tiny people inside that could hear them, and so the crowd began shouting commands that could change the boat as the tiny people supposedly listened. Of course, Tesla had the remote control in his hand as many people came out to see this spectacle. After the demonstration was over, Nikola Tesla then told the crowd that there was not any tiny people inside and that he controlled the boat using nothing more than electricity and the control over the ether. Upon hearing this proclamation of mysticism, many of the people in the crowd claimed that to be a hoax and forced Tesla to open the boat to prove there was not any tiny people inside. When he did, the crowd was even more baffled at the idea of the ether and believed that the Serbian inventor had control over magic and telepathy. Though this demonstration was a success in regards to attracting the attention of a crowd and proving the legitimacy of Tesla's theories, Tesla's theory of magic and telepathy was not a success. It was seen as a failure in the eyes of the creator as the people around him failed to believe his claims and regarded it as nothing more than magic and mind control. It was obvious that Tesla was far ahead of his time. But this realization did not discourage him as he quickly worked to develop a new technology with a higher degree of practicality that would allow him to grow his theories of the ether and tap into wireless communication over a vast distance. This was accomplished by his creation of the radio. History has provided the credit of the creation of the radio to the wrong man, believing that Marconi was the person who first created the radio and tapped into radio waves. But this is hardly the case. In fact, Marconi stole the design and invention of the radio from Tesla himself. When Marconi journeyed to the United States as an immigrant, Nikola Tesla believed the man to be in a similar situation as he once was years ago and wanted to help him out, believing that Marconi would make a great friend, a partner. Marconi was also a huge fan of Nikola Tesla and was eager to work with him right away. Taking Marconi at his word and trusting the man, Nikola Tesla then provided Marconi with the key to his laboratories and told him that he would have full access to the space, his personal notes, and his current inventions. Believing that by granting Marconi time to familiarize himself with his work, then they could begin working on newer and better ideas as soon as possible. The effect of what Tesla had done did not dawn on him until he was at a lecture hall and became aware of Marconi having fled the United States and stealing Tesla's invention of the radio and the notes that accompanied it. Marconi then coined the term, and the public, unable to accept the ideas of old mysticism and the nature of the ether, quickly grappled onto these new scientific terms to explain a phenomenon that Tesla had already worked eagerly to explain. And though Marconi made a tremendous profit from these designs and would go on to be remembered by history as the inventor of the radio, Tesla was not deterred with his mission and so continued his work to prove the validity of the ether and change the world for the better in his understanding of the nature of the universe. This began with his creation of the Tower of the Wardenclyffe. Being funded by this time by the banking investor John Pierpont Morgan, also known as J.P. Morgan, Nikola Tesla was essentially offered a nearly limitless fund of investment backing to create what he, himself, described as the connection of the global mind and the prediction of the modern-day Wi-Fi. He believed that he could create a form of wireless electricity that could tap into the ether and power everyone's devices so long as it had a built-in transmitter to receive the massive amounts of wireless energy. He planned on building a massive tower to bounce off a sufficient amount of energy off of the ionosphere of the planet and tap into the massive amount of energy stored in the electromagnetic field surrounding our planet and meet the energy needs of everyone around the world free of charge. As his tower was nearing construction and the fruit of his work and theory was within his grasp, J.P. Morgan, his investor, called for an emergency meeting with Nikola Tesla to discuss a problem that had arisen. John Pierpont Morgan became aware of the fact that Marconi had stolen Nikola Tesla's designs of the radio and other various patents and was made furious by this. As his investor, Morgan was far more concerned with profit than Tesla and was already incredibly annoyed with the massive amount of money he had poured into the inventor with nothing to show for it. When Morgan threatened to cut Tesla's funding, the inventor found no other way to satiate the man than to show him the tower and tell him what he was working on. Tesla claimed that it does not matter that Marconi stole the designs since his new invention would change the world, that the Tower of Wardenclyffe would be able to tap into the power of the ether and be able to grant free electricity to every individual around the world. After hearing this proposal, J.P. Morgan then turned to Nikola Tesla and said, "Where do you put the meter?" When Tesla asked him what he was talking about, J.P. Morgan inquired that how were they supposed to charge people for the electricity if it was free. Tesla then replied and said, "We would not. Anyone would be able to tap into it as long as they had a transmitter." After hearing this sentiment, Morgan completely cut off all funding to Tesla and told him that he was not going to help him fund an idea that is completely unprofitable. For many years now, there has been a conspiracy in the alien community that has posited forward a theory as to why the extraterrestrial awareness movement is having a massive difficulty getting its feet off of the ground, despite so many people attempting to come forward with their own abduction witness accounts. The incredible amount of annual witness reports of unidentified flying objects and overwhelming pieces of evidence as to the viability and validity of an extraterrestrial intervention on our planet. There seems to be equal effort in part to destroy the movement as it grows. Originally, ideas began floating around believing that perhaps government agents were using intense scare tactics to prevent people from sharing their stories. These agents were known as the Men in Black and would more than often threaten a person's life, safety, or family in order to keep them silent, but as the extraterrestrial movement began growing in numbers and influence, these fear tactics no longer worked in their attempts to silence the community, as others would just rise in their place. However, it appears that a new tactic has been implemented by these strange individuals hell-bent on destroying the developing information coming out of the alien community, by focusing on infiltration rather than through intimidation and scare tactics. It appears that in their own way, the best way to delegitimize a movement is to try to join it and make it look as if the movement itself is only inhabited by people of whom have absolutely no idea what they are talking about. This is none more so evident than in the case of the Starchild skull. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we will go back to analyze its strange history and why it was a part of one of the most damaging hoaxes to the alien community and future researchers of the extraterrestrial phenomenon. The Starchild skull was a supposed extraterrestrial skull that was recovered back in 1999 when a paranormalist known as Lloyd Pye claimed to have come into contact with a young couple from El Paso, Texas in February of that year, of whom were in possession of the extraterrestrial skull. Despite Lloyd Pye receiving and becoming aware of the skull back in 1999, however, the skull itself did not come into the world of relevancy until late 2003 for reasons otherwise not specified. According to the young couple of which Lloyd Pye received the extraterrestrial skull from, the skull itself was claimed to have been uncovered back in 1930 from an old mine tunnel located roughly 100 miles southwest of the city of Chihuahua in Mexico, alongside the body of a young woman of whom appeared to be buried alongside the strange skull. Unfortunately, this story cannot be confirmed, and the couple of whom supposedly provided the skull as evidence cannot be found for comment. The problem to which Lloyd Pye claims is nothing more than the couple's need for anonymity. The skull's sudden popularity in 2003 led to it quickly being the center of attention for skeptics and the scientific community, of whom agreed to undergo DNA testing of the skull to uncover whether or not it was truly extraterrestrial. Obviously enough, the DNA results came back proving not only that the skull was a human child and the entire stunt pulled was nothing more than a hoax, but that the skull was of a child of whom had passed away from hydrocephalus, a rare birth defect in which a child experiences a large amount of cranial fluid pressure that causes the still-forming skull to bulge outwards, giving it an enlarged appearance. This led to not only the extraterrestrial community being made into a laughingstock, but any other further efforts into DNA testing for additional extraterrestrial claims to be blocked by scientific establishments that perceived the endeavor as nothing more than a waste of time and resources. There is a startling connection here to be made, however, as well as the main argument for why the Starchild skull and its popularity was nothing more than a stunt to delegitimize the extraterrestrial community and the evidence gathered for extraterrestrial visitation. At the same time that the Starchild skull began making headlines all around the world, a more legitimate discovery was taking place. Led by the lead researchers involved with the promotion of the Disclosure Project spearheaded by Dr. Stephen Greer. Dr. Stephen Greer had made an incredible discovery that pertained to a strange recovered artifact that was described as being a small humanoid creature that had been mummified and buried behind an old church decades prior to its discovery that was circling black market traders, of which was then later recovered by alien enthusiasts to undergo DNA testing to prove its legitimacy as an extraterrestrial entity. This strange mummified creature appeared to share many of the same distinct characteristics described in extraterrestrial sightings, with an elongated head, small mouth, large eyes, and human-like body, but only stood to be, when measured from the top of its skull to the bottom of its feet, roughly 6 inches tall. In fact, the entire creature could approximately fit in the palm of your hand. At first sight, many people believed the tiny mummy to be nothing more than an artistic piece that used the bones of different animals to create the realistic looks and textures of a miniature humanoid creature. However, surprisingly, that proved to not be the case. Though it was next to impossible to get the mummy to be treated seriously by the scientific community and required personal funding somewhere close to $50,000 and a DNA tester willing to look past the stigma of such claims, it was quickly uncovered that the creature was completely legitimate and, strangely enough, contained human DNA. This sparked the interest of other independent researchers who looked more closely at the bone structure of the tiny creature and realized that the small humanoid mummy died at the age of 6.5 years old. This then begged the question, how could this small humanoid creature have been 6.5 years old, and where did it come from? It became apparent to some alien enthusiasts that the small creature could have been a half-human, half-alien hybrid manufactured by extraterrestrials. The main reason as to why this incredible find plays a huge role in the story is the fact that all of its media coverage and relevancy was stolen by the supposed incredible finding of the Starchild skull. In fact, the majority of the problems faced by Dr. Stephen Greer's find centered around the Starchild skull being a massive hoax, and making it next to impossible for other extraterrestrial enthusiasts to be treated seriously. As the years went on, these issues only metastasized. Not only did many websites and articles falsely name Dr. Stephen Greer's find with the name of the Starchild skull, but would often regard the find as completely debunked and unremarkable despite the overwhelming evidence of its legitimacy. This leads us down the strange rabbit hole as to the Starchild skull and its importance in destroying the alien community. One of the key players in making the Starchild skull a popular headline came from a man known as Ben Radford. Ben Radford at the time claimed to be a paranormal enthusiast and researcher who seemed to be very much a supporter of such communities when the Starchild skull was first discovered. Today, Ben Radford's true nature has shown time and time again in his books. Talking about skepticism, debunking theories, the promotion of hoaxes such as the Phantom Clown Scare, and trends in social media, along with a now famous quote in opposition of the Starchild's girl in which he more than ridicules the community. So though he was one of the key players in helping the story gain popularity, it remains obvious that he seemed to be motivated in the avenues of portraying his opposition in a negative light rather than his self-proclaimed need of support at the time. We see evidence of individuals with the same agenda all throughout the extraterrestrial community, of whom claim to be an avid supporter of the community but then slowly reveal their true agenda. One most notable instance is that regarding the story of Stan Romanek, who would often remark that his evidence would go missing, his photos would become deleted, and in one special instance, a member of his own group, when handed the camera with irrefutable proof, quickly deleted the picture and claimed it was just erased out of nowhere. Stan Romanek would later be sent to court under strange charges, with evidence of the officer in charge of his case being a corrupt opposition of whom had taken bribes in the past, as well as overwhelming evidence of an infiltration of his group. Others have even come forward claiming to have been hired to infiltrate an alien enthusiast group only to help delegitimize the entire movement. It appears that the Starchild skull is an overwhelming piece of evidence to these claims. Not only was the DNA testing of the skull funded completely by skeptics, made popular by skeptics, and disproven by skeptics, but the headlines and articles surrounding the skull have done nothing but damage to the alien community, along with stifling other incredible breakthroughs in the world of extraterrestrial evidence from being remembered or even discussed in mainstream science. Fortunately enough, evidence, Footage and the results of the DNA testing of Dr. Stephen Greer's mummified humanoid corpse can be seen in his Disclosure Project documentary that anyone can go watch and uncover the truth as to these strange cover-ups and means of infiltration. Gordon Cooper sees a UFO. Gordon Cooper lived an esteemed life as an aerospace engineer, United States Air Force pilot, and eventual astronaut. Cooper fought in World War II and was so impressive that the United States gave him the opportunity to travel into space. While Cooper was an amazing astronaut who broke records for the fastest journey from the Earth to the Moon and back, and who was also the first astronaut to spend an entire his legacy is somewhat controversial. Like many other space cadets, Cooper had been a pilot his entire life and was extremely familiar with aerospace science. His credentials as an aerospace engineer and fighter pilot proved that he was a man of science and discipline. So when he wrote his memoir detailing his experience with UFOs, his readers were perplexed. How could this man who has such a firm grip on practical science be so convinced that he has seen signs of alien life? Though some people lost faith in his credibility, Cooper still gained a following of people who agreed that extraterrestrial life not only exists but that it makes its way into the Earth's atmosphere more often than we thought. Cooper's first UFO sighting happened while he was flying over Germany post-World War II. While he and his crew were setting up a landing space for aircrafts atop a dry lake, an uninvited disc-like aircraft landed about 50 yards from the crew members. Because of its mysterious arrival, the men were conflicted whether they should approach the aircraft or call in for backup. Eventually, they moved towards it while snapping pictures of it. They recall the aircraft being completely silent as it landed and took off again. It had extended its legs when landing and recalled them as it rose back into the sky. Once it was back in the air, they never saw it again. Immediately after, Cooper called his contact at the Pentagon, where he was instructed to send the photos of the mysterious aircraft to the intelligence agency. Cooper looked at the photos himself before sending them in to ensure that they represented exactly what he saw with his own eyes. He reported that the photos were in great condition and that the aircraft was clearly visible. After a long while of waiting for a response from the Pentagon, Cooper grew suspicious that there would be no cover this up. Even without acknowledging that this aircraft was indeed an extraterrestrial UFO, the Pentagon had plenty of reason to launch an investigation because an unmarked vessel entered a classified and secured military location. After this, Cooper began to write down his experience seeing the UFO in great detail, which eventually played a huge role in his published memoir. Cooper lost a great deal of military and scientific credibility when his people began to see him as a bit crazy. He was known to publicly taunt and discredit the Pentagon because he believed that they knew more about UFOs than they revealed to the general public, and that the secrets they are harboring would be very detrimental to space exploration and military intelligence. Cryovolcanoes on Ceres. In the main asteroid belt that sits between Mars and Jupiter lies Ceres, the largest of the asteroids. Ceres, first discovered in 1801 by Giuseppe Piazzi, was originally classified as a planet. This was until other large objects were discovered in the same neighborhood as Ceres. Astrologists at the time realized they were looking at a new type of object in space, so the term asteroid, meaning star-like, was first coined as a star-like object. Describe these new objects. In the 1860s, it was widely accepted that these large asteroids had major differences to the planets we know, but a specific definition of planet was never formulated. At the 2006 Pluto debate, it was discussed the specific criteria that had to be met in order for an object to be considered a planet. Had it not been for a modification to this criteria stating the planet must have cleared the neighborhood around its orbit, Ceres would today be the fifth planet from the Sun, obviously due to the asteroid belt it lies within. Ceres is not classified as a planet but a dwarf planet and an asteroid simultaneously. Now, whilst the controversy surrounding Ceres classification is certainly interesting, that's not what we're going to discuss today. Ceres itself is home to something much more fascinating. Since early 2015, NASA's Dawn spacecraft has orbited the icy world of Ceres, examining its surface closely. It wasn't until quite a few months had passed that the Dawn would observe something so fascinating but so bizarre at the same time. It was a 13,000-foot-tall mound closely resembling what we know as a volcano. Scientists named it Ahunamans. In 2016, it was confirmed that Ahunamans was indeed a volcano, but not your average volcano, a cryovolcano. Cryovolcano is, as you can imagine, a volcano but with a twist. Instead of releasing molten rock or lava like the volcanoes we have on Earth, a cryovolcano erupts water, methane, or ammonia. The water and other gases released often turn into a solid form once exposed to the low temperature surrounding the volcano. Hence the more colloquial name ice volcanoes. These eruptions are referred to as cryomagma or cryolava. During eruption, they are liquid, but are also released as a vapor. Cryovolcanoes are thought to be able to form on moons and asteroids that used to have an abundance of water. The reason Ahana Mons erupts water and other substances rather than magma is simple. The temperatures on Ceres are simply too cold to melt rock, but warm enough that ice can melt. Ahana Mons was only able to be understood more when scientists examined mineral salt, likely the product of a cryovolcanic eruption. Inside the Ocotor crater found it had origins in a Hunamons, which in turn relates both fascinating natural structures. The Ocotor crater is 57 miles across and as deep as a Hunamons is high. The large impact that tore the giant Ocotor crater into the surface of the dwarf planet must have originally started everything and triggered the later cryovolcanic activity, says Andreas Nathis, framing camera lead investigator for Max Planck. After this event, rock around the planet reshuffled and moved up towards the surface. The change in pressure allowed water and dissolved gases to escape that would eventually form a volcano. It is also suggested that many smaller explosions around the dwarf planet caused the cryovolcanism rather than one major event. Cryovolcanism isn't exclusive to Ceres though, as it has been spotted on Enceladus, one of Neptune's largest moons. Cryovolcanoes are a fascinating insight into the wonders of the universe and things we couldn't even imagine being possible. Abell 85 Galaxy Black Hole. A black hole is essentially a region or place in space where the gravity is so strong that even things like light, radiation, or practically any particles cannot escape it. Black holes are thought to be created when a star dies. Black holes can be a variety of sizes, the biggest being a supermassive black hole. These are actually quite terrifying to think about. They have a mass equal to that of millions of suns. Is astronomical. These supermassive black holes are at the center of large galaxies across the universe. Our own galaxy, in fact, has one at the center that is known as Sagittarius A. Scientists have found that its mass is the same as around 4 million of our own suns. Black holes themselves cannot be seen due to the fact that no light can escape them, however. Scientists can, and that indicates the location of a black hole. Late last year, the Max Planck Institute for Extraterrestrial Physics found what is currently thought to be the largest black hole in the nearby universe. When observing the Abell 85 cluster, a cluster of roughly 500 galaxies, and more specifically the galaxy at the very center of the cluster known as Home 15A, scientists noticed that the center of this galaxy was much more faint than it should normally be considering the sheer mass of stars within the galaxy. This was what indicated the presence of a never-before-seen black hole. After attempting to measure the mass of said black hole, the scientists discovered the estimates were much larger than thought, and in fact, this black hole, now dubbed an ultramassive black hole, has a mass of around 40 billion times that of our sun. That is a staggering number, and there's no real way to comprehend something of that scale. However, it is fascinating nonetheless. You might be wondering how something as massive as this ultramassive black hole could even exist within a galaxy, given the size of our own. Well, Home 15A is a giant galaxy known as an elliptical galaxy. An elliptical galaxy is formed when a spiral galaxy such as our own, the Milky Way, merges within another spiral galaxy. It goes further though, as this newly formed elliptical galaxy can then merge with another elliptical galaxy, creating an even bigger galaxy. When these galaxies merge together, the black holes in their centers can also merge, and exactly like the galaxies themselves, create an even larger black hole, and so on. When these black holes collide and get larger, it can push stars away, forming the darker center. This is how the scientists discovered the Home 15A black hole. While the Home 15A black hole is the most massive in the nearby universe, being only 700 million light-years away from us, there is evidence of an even larger black hole located around 10 billion light-years away from Earth, in the TUN 618 quasar. This ultramassive black hole is estimated to have the mass of around 66 billion times that of our Sun. Our planet's southernmost continent is the most uninhabited land on the face of the Earth. It is not without trying and efforts made by researchers and explorers that this land seems to be shrouded in mystery. more rather due to the area being located directly top of the South Pole, and because of this fact, appears to be amongst the most inhospitable places in the world to visit. However, new and upcoming evidence appears to have challenged this notion of inhabitation, as relics of an ancient civilization appears to have surfaced only recently. So, today we will be uncovering these lost ancient relics and the history of the Antarctic. Both an unending tundra and an everlasting desert, Antarctica is noted as being the very last region of Earth in recorded history to be discovered. Antarctica was regarded as a land unseen until that of 1820, when the famed Russian expedition of Fabian and Michael first wrote about the sighting of the Thimble Ice Shelf and other evidence of a large continent located at the southernmost region of the world. Despite this discovery, however, the continent remained largely ignored and neglected for the entire 19th century, supposedly due to the land's hostile environment, lack of easily accessible resources, and terrible isolation. It really was not until the end of the 1800s that people began to even realize the land existed in the first place and began including it on maps and globes around the world. Oddly enough, though it was only recently discovered, myths of this land had been circulating amongst underground communities for quite a few centuries, but was often disregarded by supposed experts as nothing more than a fantasy or legend. In fact, many theorists believed that there was a continent in the region and had even went so far as naming the theoretical land, which roughly translated to the southern land, an idea that dates back to antiquity and is lost to time. No one knows where the myths of the southern land started, who knew of it, and how far back into human history it stretches, but it was definitely regarded as being information only shared amongst tight-knit communities, secret societies, and underground groups. The strangeness of the myths of Antarctica do not stop there, as the first sightings of ancient buildings in the region were first made by the ancient astronaut community that was attempting to prove an interesting idea. Around the world, we find evidence of pyramid structures that have often challenged our modern notion of the age of humanity and the technological and developmental might of our early civilizations. Given that these great structures are often found in areas that predate archaeological beliefs of early human civilizations, then discovering the location of these pyramids that humans have never been could prove to be the smoking gun evidence of possible extraterrestrial intervention. The ancient alien community then pointed at Antarctica and said that given its only recent discovery and completely uninhabitable terrain, to find such a structure amongst its icy lands would be more than enough evidence to prove such a theory. Using complex gathered research data and satellite imaging, the community worked day and night in the hopes of uncovering any evidence of these structures. Fortunately, they did. Approximately larger than the pyramids at Giza, the ancient astronaut community began noticing strange mountains that did not seem to match with the overall landscape of the region. Not only did the supposed large mountains not exist anywhere close to a mountain range, but in the region in which it inhabited did not appear to even have the stresses or strains tectonic plates that could cause a potential mountain range in the first place. Not only this, but the size of the mountain in that area ended up displaying the proportions of a perfect pyramid with 4 even sides, a symmetrical peak, and the same degree in slope gradient compared to the large pyramids at Giza. Images of these structures in high definition can also be found thanks to efforts made by researchers to locate the peaks of the mountains in the attempts to disprove these, but only work to prove their existence and showcase their symmetrical and artificial design in clearer imaging. Could it be then that perhaps a much more powerful advanced civilization with the means of producing such megalithic structures could have inhabited the region long before humans could have ever even discovered its existence in the first place? An interesting fact to take into consideration is the history of the region. What many people do not know is that Antarctica was once a lush and dense forest, with a population to match long before it became the wasteland it is most notably known as today. Evidence of this can be found when looking at a team of archaeologists and researchers that led an expedition in Antarctica in November of 2016 that lasted for several months, ending on January of 2017. The team found shocking evidence of lush forests in the region after locating and identifying a large amount of fossil fragments from ancient trees dated as far back as more than 260 million years. Interestingly enough, this timeline correlates with one very important event in the past, the Permian period, also known as the greatest mass extinction event in the history of the world. It is interesting then to consider this idea that roughly 260 million years ago, the continent of Antarctica would have been a densely populated, lush green forest with a tremendous variation in wildlife and ecosystems. A professor at the University of Wisconsin known as Dr. Gulbranston argues that the continent as a whole was much warmer and even more humid than many areas today. In fact, he has overwhelming evidence that the area would have been closer in resemblance to the barrel forest of present-day Siberia, a place today with a thriving population and a stable economy. Now, of course, you might be thinking that if Antarctica has not been a thriving land for such a long time, then how could it be that there has been any activity of human life and construction on this continent? There really could not have been any way that humans could have built any types of megalithic structures on the continent in the time that humans even came into existence. But that is entirely the point that is being made. If any relics are found, then it is without a doubt evidence of a past advanced civilization that is not human, as there is no way human beings could be responsible for its creation. But to construct such structures, these advanced races would have been able to also create large biodomes or cityscapes for their own people. Oddly enough, we have evidence for this discovery as well. A post of unknown origin began circling across many deep websites and underground conspiracy theorist blogs that talked about satellite evidence of supposed crashed spaceships or possible alien megacities located in the Antarctic. The coordinates for these structures will be provided in the description below, and these strange artificial shapes can be seen by anyone who uses Google Earth and punches in said coordinates. Taking a look at these strange structures, it is fairly obvious to see that they hold many characteristics with sightings of commonly reported unidentified flying objects. They appear to be an extremely long cigar-shaped object. Not only that, but the buildup of the snow due to the wind direction helps to show that each of these strange objects, that total 22 structures, appear to be all facing in the same direction. Designed with the exact same size and are taller than any other natural forming peaks in the region that is mostly flat due to a lack of tectonic pressure. All of these pieces of information point to an artificial creation as not naturally forming structures. Or mountain ranges. Could it be that these structures are overwhelming evidence for the ancient alien community and proof of these possible ancient megalithic structures that we see with satellite imaging? Most likely. The reason for this is a little more frustrating than past evidence and theory would tell you. Many people amongst these communities believe that possibly the government is well aware of these hidden structures and possible alien artifacts, and that they are attempting to hide these findings from the rest of the world by ignoring the area altogether or not approving of further expeditions and archaeological expertise. That might be the case, but it is much more realistic that the main cause for these refusals are more accurately due to political and economic reasons and not that of a massive cover-up. You see, Antarctica, as far as the governments of the world care, really does not exist. The first real attempts at construction on the continent was made by research scientists who were privately funded or had some sort of means to make their way to the icy continent. These research scientists came from all around the world and were only interested in one thing: science and discovery. Due to this passion, the original research development teams came together and formed the Antarctic Treaty. A required pact made it impossible for anyone to make claims of territory and enforces open knowledge for everyone. It is due to this treaty that governments from around the world refuse to even participate into any developments onto the icy continent in fear that their equipment, technology, and infrastructure would just be stolen, reverse-engineered, or completely destroyed by other governments upholding the treaty. Oftentimes in countries that have a beautiful countryside or an incredible scenic and historically important area of wildlife, efforts will be made by the government to preserve this beautiful slice of nature in the hopes of allowing the public at large to enjoy its unaging beauty for centuries to come by establishing federally protected locations that prevent further developments of any kind that could damage the protected area known as a national park or wildlife preserve. Unfortunately, these unbelievably perfect natural sceneries also seem to hold a dark secret that governments work around the clock to attempt to cover up in their efforts to prevent panic from further spreading into the public at large. Today, we will be going over and discussing these strange dark secrets and a possible theory as to what could truly be going on under the surface. There seems to be an unreasonable amount of disappearances that occur in national parks from around the world. An almost disproportionate amount given any other area it is compared to regarding visiting populations of any kind. Of course, skeptics might argue that it would make sense for there to be so many disappearances given the fact that national parks are massive and, to an untrained individual, could potentially be a death sentence if they happen to become lost in its unending size. This does not appear to be the case, however, as we are not merely discussing fatalities or discovered bodies. In fact, we are talking about quite the opposite. Many people walk into a national park and are never seen and heard from again. This strangeness is compounded when regarding information surrounding the missing hikers and campers. There are many experienced hikers and campers who disappear completely. Some such hikers even laying out plans of travel, backup phones in case of emergency, telling family members and friends where their trail will be covering, and so on. But when search parties go out to find them, not a single clue left behind as to what could have possibly happened to them seems to surface. Take for example one such case of a young 27-year-old man by the name of Vadim Mukim. Vadim had went out into the area of the Sunset Falls campgrounds with multiple friends and experienced outdoorsmen in the hope of finding a way to get out, of having a relaxing time out in the national park located near where he lived. Vadim was no stranger to the outdoors, and it was often common to find him amongst other experienced hikers, campers, and outdoorsman enthusiasts. Oddly enough, the group of friends spent the day riding mountain bikes and ATVs, having fun before heading back to their cabin. When they were at the cabin at roughly 6 o'clock p.m., the group of friends went out again to go ride for a little while more in the dark. Vadim decided to stay behind to relax a bit and so told his friends to go on without him. When the friends later returned, only a few hours had passed, but it seemed obvious that something was wrong. Vadim could not be found anywhere. Immediately, the group of friends contacted authorities, but it was apparent that he had mysteriously vanished without a trace of a clue left behind to find out where he went. No tracks, no return note, nothing taken from his equipment. Vadim just disappeared. Over the next few days, search crews of over 100 different volunteers worked tirelessly to search for Vadim and combed the area in rigorous search, but still found no trace of the man even within the search radius of 3 miles. Vadim's case is not the only one of its kind. Countless reports of people going missing seem to happen all the time in national parks. Oddly enough, these reports do not contribute to the death count provided by government statistics, and so are then essentially covered up for some unknown reason. Could it be that there is something to hide? For us to find that out, we need to ask the right questions. If these people who have gone missing were in excellent physical and mental condition while also possessing incredible hiking skills, and were essentially regarded as individuals of whom knew exactly what they were doing when they went missing and there was still no trace of them to be found, then we need to consider the idea that perhaps there is something other than the decisions of these hikers at fault for their disappearances. So we should first ask ourselves, is there something that is being hidden that exists in these national parks? One of the biggest clues that we can first gather is the creation of national parks and the reason for it. Why and how are national parks formed? It appears to be very simple. National parks are formed by an act of the government of said country declaring the land to now be protected and immediately seized by said government. This has caused a variety of issues in the past. One most notable is the reference to the town of Boston, Ohio, that formed the national park under an executive order by the president on top of an already existing town that led to many residents of the town to be forced out of their homes at gunpoint. Could it be that perhaps national parks are formed to hide something that has been found? To preserve wildlife or creatures that otherwise need to remain hidden? Why else would the creation of such zones be so violent and protected by the federal government? An interesting statistic of this idea comes from the commonly reported sightings of strange creatures in national parks from around the world. In the Aconcagua forest, many have reported supernatural sightings of the spirits of departed and strange orbs of light following them. All throughout North and South America, national parks are a hotspot for alien activity, sightings of creatures known as Sasquatches. In other places around the world, strange monsters, demons, and other appearances are reported in national parks, and it seems to be a trend that only continues to grow as more and more tourists visit these areas. Could it be that these areas are being preserved to cover up these strange sightings and occurrences? Further evidence can be found when analyzing a surprising number of cases found at the Green Mountain National Forest near Glastonbury Mountain and Vermont's Long Trail. In fact, many locals regard the area with a sense of supernatural and paranormal themes, as many of the disappearances appear to happen in a relatively small area referred to as the Bennington Triangle. The area was provided that name by the locals after an unreasonable amount of disappearances began to happen during 1945 to 1950 of experienced hikers, travelers, campers, and outdoorsmen. Some of these disappearances also seem to occur while the person was still within 50 yards of their group but still happened to vanish without a trace. Connections made in a previous video that linked the strange occurrences of Bigfoot sightings and unidentified flying objects has caused us at Unexplained Mysteries to make further connections between ancient myths and religious beliefs from around the world. What if the reason for why governments are forming national parks and preventing these areas from being further developed is due to the fact that maybe these locations around the world are hotspots of paranormal, supernatural, and extraterrestrial activity? What if these areas are gateways to other worlds or realms? An interesting parallel can be made about the old myths of Merlin the Wizard, who claimed to have entered deep forests to locate a long-forgotten race of ape-like creatures that had the ability to do magic and travel between different worlds. What if then, these Sasquatch creatures are potentially ape-like creatures that Merlin claims to have encountered, and the cause for so many people disappearing without a trace is because perhaps they had stumbled into a gateway to another world or were taken there by some strange creature? Further evidence of this assumption can be found by analyzing the peculiar case of 8-year-old Catherine Van Ulst, who disappeared from Devil's Den State Park near the Arkansas Ozark National Forest for over 6 days. It was a wonder to the search and rescue team to have found the young girl alive after nearly a week of being lost in the woods, given that most people will collapse of exhaustion after less than a couple of days. Oddly enough, the young girl appeared to not have been aware of the time having passed, and when she was located, she calmly walked out of a nearby cave and said, "Here I am," with no cause of concern or worry. This puzzled the search and rescue team, as it almost appeared as if the little girl had been untouched by time and was not even aware of having been missing in the first place. Many experts speculated a possible abduction attempt, but the facts of the story do not seem to match up with the recovery or the information provided by the girl, who claimed she was just playing with her brothers and then suddenly was being called for by name as she exited the cave. Einstein predicted that the nature of space and time begins to warp and change around strange openings known as wormholes. He would later go on to predict that movement between large expanses of space and time could be possible via wormholes, and that wormholes could potentially pop up anywhere. Could it be that perhaps these strange creatures have the ability to conjure up these tears in the fabric of space and time, or that perhaps these national parks naturally hold these supernatural occurrences inside them, purposefully hidden by the government from the public? Although we may not have all of the answers, the researchers at Unexplained Mysteries are working around the clock to make further connections and provide evidence to these theories, and more to come. Hikers on Devil's Mountain. Resting on the border of San Pablo, there is a mountain referred to by locals living in the area as the Devil's Mountain. The mountain has been surrounded with a number of disappearances from hikers every single year that claims the lives of even the most experienced hikers in the region. One such story from the locals tells of that of a married couple that went on a hike to the mountain and stayed there for a few days. After they had met others and told them they would be taking a forked path, were never seen from again, leaving many people wondering which path they had taken, since there seemed to have been no forked path in the area. This story would later come up once again after a group of boys went to the mountain on a hiking trip and came across a married couple that fit the look and description of the couple that had went missing a few years prior, and so followed the couple, believing that they might be ghosts or strange manifestations of the lost couple. As they followed the couple, they witnessed them going down a forked path and so followed them, of which eventually led to them losing sight of the couple and sustaining injuries falling down an area of the mountain. This has led some to believe that the lost people of whom went hiking on the mountain are still there, stuck in a possible time loop or warped reality in which they are jumping through time and encountering other people of whom went missing on the mountain years prior. These fears have left many, including experienced hikers, worried as to how or why these strange occurrences have been appearing on the mountain, and so leave many fearful of journeying through the region. The ancient megalithic city of Machu Picchu. Referred to as the Lost City of the Incas, the ancient megalithic city of Machu Picchu had evaded the discovery of many Spanish explorers during the Spanish conquest in the 16th century. Although many were aware of the existence of the large city since it had been abandoned by the Incas centuries in the past, the truth and the location regarding the site was completely shrouded in mystery. In 1911, the city was rediscovered by an American historian known as Hiram Bingham, who brought the site to international attention. The undisturbed location not only gave the clearest view into the lives of the indigenous tribes, but also led to many other conspiracy theories and revelations regarding the technological progress of the people. The The city appeared to be a large megalithic structure using stones cut to such precise measurements and in massive sizes that it led many to question the construction capabilities previously imagined by the local populations. In 2007, the site was voted to be one of the new 7 wonders of the world in a worldwide internet poll and has been featured on several episodes of the Ancient Aliens television show on the History Channel. The Great Pyramid or Great Pyramid of Giza is home to many mysteries. Because of this, many researchers, scientists, and archaeologists are constantly examining and studying it. There was a whole series of studies going on, but in 2015, whilst conducting thermal examinations of the Great Pyramid, researchers discovered that 3 stones located at the bottom of the pyramid were a higher temperature than any of the others. Whilst this discovery itself is truly puzzling, it could be the result of a variety of different factors from differing air currents inside the pyramid, even more small undiscovered areas, or perhaps an anomalous building material which could indicate repairs or strength carried out thousands of years ago. The team of scientists and researchers came from around the globe to carry out these thermal tests. The tests themselves are just as interesting as they would examine and carry out testing during different times of the day to test different theories. The morning around sunrise was a specific time the researchers would carry out scans whilst the sun was beaming onto the limestone blocks and heating them up. They would then carry out the same scans but in the evening around sunset once the same limestone blocks were cooling down. They continued these tests until they found the aforementioned anomaly of the 3 limestone blocks in particular that would display a difference of around 6 degrees compared to the rest of the block, which would at most show a temperature difference of around 0.1 to 0.5 degrees between sunrise and sunset. This difference in temperature is quite puzzling when compared to the minimal difference of the rest. These affected blocks in question were located on the east side of the pyramid. This could well have something to do with why they are anomalies, but for now this remains a mystery. A discovered 1.8 billion-year-old nuclear reactor. Back in 1972, when a large amount of uranium ore was mined from the Oklo mine located out in the country of Gabon, a small nation found in Central Africa, scientists began to test the uranium deposits to catalog the amount of recovered uranium-235 that was gathered from the site and could be used for ongoing efforts of nuclear fission and nuclear reactors. Unfortunately, they quickly realized that a substantial amount of uranium-235 was missing from the ore deposits as uranium-235 naturally forms a solid concentration of 0.072% but found a significant amount lacking from the mined minerals. As they investigated the situation, believing that perhaps more than 200 kilograms had been stolen, they quickly realized that located near the mined location was the perfect conditions to form a believed to be naturally forming nuclear reactor. That is dated to be roughly 1.8 billion years old. Scientists claim that the uranium ore was used up when a naturally formed cavern using groundwater to help stabilize the nuclear reaction was discovered underground. Theorists, however, have an alternative explanation. Given the fact that the specifications required to form a naturally made nuclear reactor require specific storage of the uranium-235, the continued influx of water and a number of steps to prevent the compounds from becoming superheated, it is believed that the location is not naturally formed and rather the use of a primitive nuclear reactor by time-traveling humans needed to create a substantial amount of energy. Today, the claim is widely debated as one of the key pieces of evidence of time-traveling humans and their influence on the past. The mystery of fast radio bursts and where they come from. Astronomers have discovered that somewhere out in the vastness of space is some strange anomalous mystery object. Not only that, but it keeps giving off extremely large blasts of radio waves. These have been observed coming out from around it in all directions, traveling at the speed of light. Vast radio bursts, or FRBs for short, have always been a mystery for astronomers trying to understand the strange nature of the cosmos. But this new finding might help to shed light on what might be causing these strange signals. When astronomers turned their attention to the possible source of these sounds, they discovered an area with an extremely strong magnetic field, suggesting that the FRBs come from an unexplainable object that exists in a very intense galactic environment. Scientists are still trying to understand what could be causing this extreme magnetic source, and not many theories have arisen since its discovery back in January of 2018. The lead researcher on the matter, Emily Petroff, working out of the Netherlands Institute for Radio Astronomy, claimed that researchers are directly probing the local environment of a source in a distant galaxy said to be responsible for this matter more than 3.8 billion light-years away. The current theory of the cause is said to be that of a supermassive black hole that might be affected by a nearby entity causing the source of the magnetism, though any additional information is completely unclear on the matter. The research group is confident that in a few years, more creative theories will emerge to help explain this strange radio anomaly coming from deep space and what it could mean for the extreme local galactic environment. The legend of the Codex Gigas, one of the most well-known stories concerning that of a person making a deal with the devil, is the existence of the fabled Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas, also referred to as the Devil's Bible, was supposedly written by the devil himself after a desperate monk summoned him in exchange for his life. According to the legend, a monastery in Bohemia that made up the monks of the Black Cloth, a radical Christian group of whom devoted their belief to God by performing gruesome acts of starvation, isolation, and self-mutilation, accepted the terms outlined by one monk who promised to write the greatest book in a single night. The reason for this promise was due to the fact that the monk of the ministry had broken such a sacred rule of their monastery that the sin itself was covered up. After the other monks had convened, they decided that the punishment for the monk would be to wall himself up alive, essentially trapping him into a mausoleum. This led the monk to quickly promise the monastery that he could earn redemption by crafting the largest book that held all of human knowledge, including magic, medicine, information on herbs, as well as the entire Bible in only one night. The monastery agreed to this outlandish promise on the basis of making a deal with the monk. They would allow him a chance at redemption if he could create the book in one night, but if he failed, they would continue with their punishment regardless. This led to the monk working throughout the night in a moment of panic, gathering all of the supplies necessary and binding the massive book before realizing that it would be humanly impossible to complete the task. At the stroke of midnight, in his desperation, he performed a dark ritual and summoned the devil himself. He quickly promised the devil his soul if the devil himself would use his supernatural powers to create the book and save him from death. In an instant, the devil accepted the deal and wrote the entire book in a single night, fulfilling the promise and saving the life of the monk. Interestingly enough, in the modern day, when experts took the time to look over the book, they found overwhelming evidence that the entire book was written by a single author in an incredibly short amount of time. The expected amount of time to work on such a massive book was expected to be more than a single author's lifetime. However, the entire piece has a consistent style of writing, of which is only possible to accomplish by having a lone author using the same type of ink made in the same way as is common with books with a single author, and has an entire page of a drawing of the devil as a reference to the credit of the author. The Grafton Monster. In the small town of Grafton, West Virginia, strange reports of a hulking monster roaming around the countryside sparked interest amongst locals looking to uncover the truth behind the claims. Back in the 1960s, many residents claimed that they could see a wandering, lonely figure that was said to be similar in design to that of a grotesque Bigfoot creature or that of the elusive skunk ape roaming in the region of the town of Grafton. Eyewitness statements claim that the creature stood somewhere between 7 to 9 feet tall, with slick, pale skin similar to that of a seal. While some witnesses claimed that the monster was headless when viewed from the back, others have claimed that the creature had a head down close to its chest with a large humpback blocking the view of the head from behind. Many farmers in the area have reported cattle going missing due to the creature, as well as hearing a low whistling sound before an attack by the monster itself. Given the large amount of sightings in the town and the focus of the residents to get rid of themselves of the creature back in the 1960s, the creature was referred to as the Grafton Monster and was the main focus of farmers and paranoid residents looking to save their town from a terrible monstrosity. Fortunately enough, over the next few years, sightings of the creature died down and eventually stopped altogether. Today, the creature is remembered only in myth. One of the most overwhelming pieces of evidence in relation to the issue of national security regarding the story of extraterrestrial life is that of an alien known as Val Valiant Thor. Though many skeptics widely regard the existence of extraterrestrials as being an incredible impossibility, not only is there overwhelming evidence of extraterrestrial life having visited our pale blue planet, but that this life infiltrated the highest levels of government and manipulated high military intelligence officials before finishing his mission and leaving the planet with his gathered intelligence. The name of this extraterrestrial was that of Val Valiant Thor, and according to the evidence recovered, he is merely one of many others that have used the same tactics and strategies to infiltrate different levels of government security, proving the issue of extraterrestrials to be that of national security concerns and overwhelming threat of outside life. Back in 1967, the extraterrestrial community became aware of the book titled Stranger at the Pentagon, that detailed information regarding a possible extraterrestrial visitor that worked alongside military intelligence officials at the Pentagon in the United States. Though many believed that perhaps the book was nothing more than a hoax, recent news had surfaced about the legitimacy of the book when it was authenticated by the whistleblower Phil Schneider, who not only agreed that the book was a factual description of the events regarding the Pentagon, but that the extraterrestrial known as Val Valiant Thor worked alongside his father. In fact, Phil Schneider went on record and claimed that he had a picture of Val Valiant Thor and showed it to many different people at his lecture taken back in August of 1943, with irrefutable proof of the location being taken at a high military intelligence official location. Unfortunately, before further copies of the image could be created, Phil Schneider had been found dead shortly thereafter, making the last video recording of Phil Schneider the only evidence of his claims and the picture he possessed, which can be found on YouTube today. Due to this, Phil Schneider's passing makes the last video clip recorded and the book the only surviving witness account of the events. According to the book, Val Valiant Thor landed on March 16, 1957 in Alexandria, Virginia, where two policemen approached the craft with their weapons drawn on the alien, only for him to immediately counter their attacks by using advanced techniques of what was described as thought transference to essentially use mind control to manipulate the policemen to drop their weapons and drive him to Washington, D.C., which is exactly what they did without any hesitation or struggle. This would not be the last of the extent of this mind control tactic used, as Val Valiant Thor would then go on to manipulate high military personnel that allowed him to pass through high security posts to reach the Pentagon and then furthermore the White House itself to be granted an audience with their then United States President Dwight D. Eisenhower. This is where the alien's dishonesty would shine and the clear statement of his intentions would come through. Val Valiant Thor made the incredible claim to the United States President that his mission was to come to the planet Earth and provide a means to not only grant free energy for all of the Earth's residents, but to usher in a new golden age that worked to solve all illnesses, deformities, crippling conditions, and so on, though never described an actual definition as to what he perceived as illness and crippling conditions. Though many supporters of Val Valiant Thor himself believe this to be a genuine want and proposition, here at Unexplained Mysteries, there appears to be overwhelming evidence for the contrary. In fact, it appears to be obvious that the intentions of Val Valiant Thor were far more sinister than expected. The striking notability of these sinister means was his blatant disregard for the rights to free will. All throughout the book and various witness accounts, it talks about how Val Valiant Thor used strange techniques in telepathy and mind control to gain access to high military intelligence, or to trick individuals into helping him for various tasks and access points. These strange mental tricks, including making people act as a slave to his will, causing people to see odd and vivid hallucinations of all different kinds, as well as convincing complete strangers to trust him and become attracted to him, as he gave lectures at random alien and UFO meetups across Virginia and Washington, D.C. These tricks and miracles would only become more and more horrifying in their nature as the true mission of Val Valiant Thor came to light. Even though the extraterrestrial visitor was a self-proclaimed savior of humanity, supposedly wanting nothing more than to provide a vaguely advanced technology capable of curing all as well as providing free energy, next to no effort was provided into completing this mission. In fact, when Val Valiant Thor approached the President of the United States and came forward with his proposition, Dwight D. Eisenhower said that it could very well cause a danger to the industries of capitalism and to humanity in general if there were no struggles left to overcome, claiming that obstacles and pain are the driving forces of human nature, and if a supposed peace on Earth were to exist, humanity would slowly devolve into nothing and no great minds could prosper and solve issues if no issues existed. Essentially clarifying that if all our help came from an extraterrestrial force, humanity would be forced into a premature state of infancy, relying solely on extraterrestrial technology and become an inherent slave race of these forces. After hearing this, Val Valiant Thor completely redacted his efforts to provide these technologies and seemed almost perfectly content with not helping humanity. In fact, the whole proposition turned out to be nothing more than an obvious bluff. Shortly after this, Valiant Thor then began to try to convince the United States president if he could take him aboard his spaceship and take him back to his home planet of Venus. Eisenhower then asked Valiant Thor where his home planet was specifically and what it was like. Valiant Thor then replied that his home planet was the planet Venus, the second planet from the Sun, and that it was paradise on Earth with beautiful lush green forests and heavenly atmospheres. Of course, at this time no one was aware what the surface of Venus looked like, and though the planet was known to have a lot of the same characteristics as Earth, nothing else more was understood. The truth is known today that the surface of Venus is a blazing hot planet, which is more hell-like in its appearance than anything Valiant Thor claimed for it to be, marking one of the first and obvious dishonest statements he would provide. Luckily, the president had the sense to refuse and instead had the extraterrestrial detained at the headquarters of the Department of Defense known as the Pentagon. This move turned out to be exactly what the extraterrestrial visitor was hoping for, as Valiant Thor allowed many to believe he was contained within the Pentagon. But many other witness reports discuss personnel seeing Valiant Thor roaming around the area without supervision and accessing secret military intelligence files. It was believed that Valiant Thor was using a nearly supernatural ability, as many of these witness reports regarded seeing the alien in an ethereal form wandering around, but when they would enter the room, he was supposedly staying in, he would be there acting as if nothing was going on. Shortly after these stunts, it became apparent that the alien could not be completely contained and that he was perhaps acting as a spy to gather intelligence information for extraterrestrial forces. These tensions reached a climax after the Department of Defense began doing state-of-the-art testing against the clothing materials brought by Valiant Thor himself. The materials were described as being completely indestructible in nature. When Valiant Thor became aware of these tests, he merely sniggered and explained that humans were not capable of causing any damage to his clothes or to himself, and seemingly laughed off the idea of being stopped. Threatened by this, the United States general conducting the investigations confronted Valiant Thor, seemingly immune to his attempts at mind control, and made a few key observations. The general brought up the fact that it seemed more than a little peculiar that Valiant Thor would make his appearance only after the invention and use of the nuclear weapon. The general then clarified that even though modern weapons were incapable of damaging the clothes and the extraterrestrial himself, he was more than aware of how an atom bomb works and how it not only annihilates all matter, but that due to the neutrino bombardment, the atoms themselves are split apart, essentially threatening the alien that if a weapon can't hurt him, an atom bomb surely could. The general then made the rather brilliant connection that it appeared to him that extraterrestrials were now only getting involved as a ploy to gather military intelligence due to their fear of humanity's ability to now stand a chance in a fight. Valiant Thor then confirmed his sinister orders by not only clarifying that there were other extraterrestrial beings already infiltrating the United States, a supposed 77 others in fact, but that even more were walking amongst the human race all across the world, a number that would only continue to grow in the coming years. Not only does this wholeheartedly prove the extraterrestrial intention against the human race, but that the threat of these alien visitors as a national security safety concern is overwhelming in nature. The United States military base known as Area 51 is known across the world as being a hotspot of alien conspiracy, as well as a possible research base housing extraterrestrial spacecraft and attempting to work at reverse engineering further alien technologies that have been recovered by the United States military. What many alien enthusiasts are not aware of, however, is that the United Kingdom has its very own version of Area 51. Since its use with the United Kingdom military operations, mysteries that have only deepened as new evidence and theory comes to light. So today we will be exploring the vast complex conspiracy surrounding Rudloe Manor, also known as the United Kingdom's Area 51. The history of Rudloe Manor started from very humble beginnings. Originally created as a bathstone mining station, the area that would later be Rudloe Manor was worked and designed to mine bathstone from the region to be used in massive building projects, utilizing the material and its ability to be cut in any direction, a property that other layering stones do not have. This led to larger scale projects and cheaper means of production, which worked to help build hospitals, different forms of housing, and other major construction projects across the United Kingdom. It was not until the start of World War II that Rudloe Manor gained its use in military operations, as the tunnels from the existing Bathstone mine was a prime location to store ammunition and other material after the relentless strategies by the Nazi regime that led to massive bombings of above-ground facilities. These tunnels and further large caverns that burrowed deep into the ground and helped to create a safe and stable natural bunker was merely used as a central ammunition depot at the start of the war, but soon the area found itself to be a major control center, used by the Royal Air Force. This led to the creation of further operations within the underground facilities of the Rudloe Manor in 1940 that included the operations room, the filter room, and then finally the shadow factory. It is this collection of rooms that would later lead to the formation of an alien research base after the end of World War II. The operations room was essentially used as a military command center, establishing covert protocols on the handling of sensitive information and issuing out military commands to the Royal Air Force and establishing secret clandestine projects. The filter room acted as an intelligence filter, hence where it got its name, that served to establish a complex sorting system that helped to provide intelligence regarding enemy operations and further sensitive information and documents with such a secure filtering system that no leaks of information would have ever been possible from this filter room. These two rooms, however, dwarf in comparison to the importance of the shadow factory. The factory was originally established under the belief that a secret underground facility with the ability to create aircraft was necessary in the event that the Nazi forces continued their bombing assaults and destroyed factory productions of aircraft. This led to the creation of a complete underground facility with the incredible ability to produce entire aircraft in an assembly line from nothing but raw materials deep underground. Though the factory was claimed to have never been in operation, this would soon change during the 1950s. After what alien enthusiasts refer to as a definitive UFO incident, Rudloe Manor was then seen as a hotspot for alien activity and a control center for further investigations. This incident occurred as Royal Air Force pilots returned from a bombing raid and encountered unidentified flying objects. Though the details around this incident are unknown, released reports provide further information claiming that Winston Churchill himself asked for the event to be covered up to prevent mass panic. This would develop into its own team of investigators from the Joint Intelligence Committee at Rudloe Manor and within the operations room as weekly reports would be filled regarding the presence of extraterrestrials and the military's involvement. Further leaked information began spreading that the underground shadow factory soon became used as a potential reverse engineering facility, as the Royal Air Force had supposedly recovered a crashed alien spaceship that was being studied and held in the underground facility. Interestingly enough, these rumors are further confirmed by the James Bond equivalent of the alien world, Nick Pope, who used to work for the British Ministry of Defence and was tasked by the government to study and gather further information and research relative to unidentified flying objects, the alien presence, and their potential threat to national security. Pope would later go on to be an advocate for the disclosure projects with the hopes of the UK government releasing further documents relative to their findings of extraterrestrial activity, but would later go on to say that mysteriously all of the files pertaining to the 1950s operations at Rudloe Manor that concerned alien activity was destroyed and unable to be recovered. Despite this unfortunate turn of events, further documents had been later released to the British National Archive that provided proof and evidence of the alien investigations and clandestine operations held at Rudloe Manor at this time, and with the help of Nick Pope and his efforts at alien disclosure. These clandestine operations included a wide array of alien reports that spanned over 5,000 documents, as well as famous events that had been covered up by the British government. The list of these events include a near-collision report of a 737 airplane almost colliding with an unidentified flying object with statements from the captain and first officer, an alien response team investigating and recovering a crashed UFO at the Bowen Mountains in Wales, full detailed investigative reports of the Western Ars incident that many locals claim to have heard a loud explosion over the Atlantic confirming the incident to be of extraterrestrial origin, the 40 minutes of supposedly missing footage from the Blue Streak missile test launch that's shown evidence of a craft landing and the presence of a spaceman as described in the report, and many other incredible discoveries that seemed too frightening to be true. Of course, These reports and their details would lead many conspiracy theorists and alien enthusiasts to begin referring to Rudloe Manor as the UK's Area 51 and as a potential command center for black-budget operations that would soon go above the clearance level of even the highest officials in the military, British government, and clandestine operations. As much as people might argue that this would be a stretch, the logistics and developments that had already been established at Rudloe Manor were more than prepared to undertake such a project and to become a completely self-reliant facility and factory capable of its own research, production, and testing. What many critics and skeptics of this idea do not realize is the extent of the size and ability of Rudloe Manor's vast complex tunnel systems. The underground tunnels and facilities make up more than 2.2 million square feet. To get a sense of the scale, one should look towards one of the biggest warehouse production facilities in the world, Amazon's fulfillment center. 2.2 million square feet is more than twice the size of Amazon's fulfillment center, which works to be a massive warehouse that produces and houses the endless goods available on Amazon available worldwide. Now imagine that level of production completely underground, self-sufficient, and twice as massive with a budget of the British military, additional black budget spending, and an endless amount of Royal Air Force engineers that are capable of doing the impossible. The potential is nearly limitless. Now if we take into account the past 70 years and the massive amount of reports that total over 5,000 documents and investigations, that would mean the facility had the ability to investigate and report roughly once every 5 days on top of the additional clandestine operations that existed throughout this time, and the usage of the manor for sensitive intelligence and military operations. These reports are also only made up of the surviving documents and shared intelligence with the National Archive that are still around from that era. According to various sources and those within the intelligence community, many other reports, investigations, and further informational documents had been destroyed to prevent any further leaked information, which could mean an additional tremendous amount of evidence for the search and alien disclosure that are lost forever. The scale of this performance had to have already been massive and well underway. It is also important to remember that information at the Rudloe Manor went through high levels of filtering processes, and so forged documents would not have been created or stored at the facility. Many skeptics claim that the released documents supplied to the National Archive are merely bogus documents that work to spread misinformation amongst general public. However, given the strict protocols that had already existed amongst the Joint Intelligence Committee and further witness accounts from ex-British Ministry of Defense Nick Pope, this seems to be the most improbable explanation for the release of these 1950s documents and archived information. What is even more interesting about this case is that even though Site 1 of the Rudloe Manor, the Site 3 buildings along with the vast underground tunnel complex is still used and hidden by the British government and Royal Air Force. These tunnels were stated as being repurposed with the ability to house British politicians and other high-clearance personnel during the event of a nuclear strike and be completely self-reliant and independent with vast established systems to live indefinitely underground. This could be further confirmation of the abilities of the Shadow Factory and its potential of vast production, self-reliance, and pre-existing infrastructure spanning nearly 7 decades of developments. But what do you think of Rudloe Manor? Be sure to share your answers and questions below in the comments section and help us solve these unexplained mysteries. Universe is expanding faster than we thought. Whilst we may not be able to feel, see, or really understand it, the universe is constantly expanding. This, however, is not in the normal sense of the word. We are located within our galaxy, the Milky Way. However, the galaxies outside of ours are moving away from us, and the galaxies that are the farthest away are moving away from us faster. If you were to be in a different galaxy, for example, this would be the same. Galaxies outside of that galaxy would be moving away from it, even our own. They are not moving in the conventional sense of the word because they're moving with space rather than passing through. Whilst difficult to understand, the universe itself has no center and everything within it is actually moving away from everything else. A famous analogy coined to explain this expansion is thinking of the universe as a loaf of raisin bread dough. As it is cooked, it rises and expands, and as a result, the raisins move away from one another, but they are still inside the bread. At this point, you might be asking, why isn't Earth moving away from everything else then? This is because on a local scale, such as around us, gravity keeps everything together and holds it in place. This was first discovered in 1925 by Edwin Hubble, the man the famous Hubble telescope is named after, and he proved that there was a direct relationship between the speeds of distant galaxies and their distances from Earth. This is now known as Hubble's law. The number meaning the rate of cosmic expansion in relation to speeds of galaxies and their distance from Earth is known as the Hubble constant. In the last couple of years, even up to this year, new evidence is suggesting that the universe is expanding much faster than initially first thought. The universe is outpacing all our expectations in its expansion. And that is very puzzling, says lead study author Adam Rees, an astronomer at Johns Hopkins University who co-won the 2011 Nobel Prize in Physics for helping discover dark energy. This new evidence suggests that measurements of the Hubble constant mentioned earlier using cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the early universe, and the Big Bang is actually conflicting with estimates of younger stars and even the Milky Way. This discrepancy is still apparent even after taking into account dark energy and other cosmic forces that are thought to be speeding up the universe's expansion. This has and is still disputed by other scientists and cosmologists as incorrect or incomplete data. However, fresh research from the Hubble as new as 2019 suggests this gap is actually larger than ever. It is estimated that the universe as we know it is expanding up to 9% faster than we originally thought when examining the trajectory of the universe's expansion from the Big Bang. What does this mean? Well, the discrepancy between the rate we believe the universe is expanding now and what we believed it should be from the trajectory created from the Big Bang means that scientists could be missing an essential factor in the cosmological model when measuring that would account for this discrepancy. For now at least, what's missing is a mystery. But with all the fascinating discoveries we've talked about today, it would be no surprise if in a couple of years from now we were discussing a new strongest material or new type of formation on a distant planet. Or even a new theory of the universe, we just don't know. One thing is for sure though, as we try and figure out this wacky, wonderful universe, is that it certainly won't be boring. TUN 618 black holes are massive objects that according to our most recent knowledge exist in almost all the galaxies in the universe. However, there are some black holes that are so huge that it is impossible for us to wrap our heads around them. One such black hole is known as TUN 618. It is situated near the North Galactic Pole in constellation Canes Venatici. TUN 618 itself is a distant and very luminous quasar. It has been termed as a hyperluminous, broad absorption line, radio-loud quasar. This extremely luminous quasar was first discovered in 1957 during a survey of the faint blue stars that don't lie near the plane of the Milky Way galaxy. Scientists have estimated the size of this black hole to be equal to 66 billion suns. This makes it the most massive black hole ever found. The light originating from the quasar TUN 618 that surrounds the ultramassive black hole is estimated to be 10.4 billion years old. The galaxy that surrounds the quasar is not visible from Earth simply because the quasar itself outshines the galaxy. The quasar is estimated to be shining as brightly as 140 trillion suns. This makes it one of the brightest objects in the observable universe. Scientists have estimated the radius of the event horizon of the black hole to be approximately 194 billion kilometers. Event horizon can be described as the boundary beyond which nothing can escape, including light, which gives a black hole its distinctive black color. Researchers are baffled by the tremendous size of the black hole. One of the theories about the origins of this black hole is that it is a direct collapse black hole. Instead of being formed by a dying star supernova, this black hole was formed by a supermassive gas cloud collapsing under its own gravity. This is such a powerful process that it is capable of taking all the stars within the gas cloud with it, resulting in the consumption of thousands of distinct sources of mass and eventually the formation of a supermassive black hole. The mysterious radio signals from the M82 galaxy. For 10 years now, astronomers have been picking up mysterious radio signals from the M82 galaxy. Located about 12 million light-years away, the Messier 82 is a starburst galaxy located in the Ursa Major constellation. This galaxy is 5 times more luminous than our Milky Way galaxy, and its center is 100 times more luminous than our galaxy's center. Receiving a radio signal from such a distant galaxy is quite mind-blowing. It opens up all kinds of possibilities. Researchers do not know anything about the object that is making these signals. The first signal from the M82 galaxy was received by the Parkes Radio Telescope in Australia. Up until now, more than 20 signals have been discovered. As you would expect, this is one of the hottest topics in astronomy today. Some scientists have given the theory that these signals are coming from the high-energy pulsars that are being consumed by a black hole in the M82 galaxy. Another theory points towards the possibility of massive cosmic explosions, and then there is always a possibility, as per our own understanding, that an alien race might just be trying to contact us. The discovery of these mysterious radio signals from the M82 galaxy has given scientists a new hope about the possibility of an alien civilization. At the same time, it has also opened up a whole new mystery to be solved by researchers. Will we be able to see this mystery unfold during our lifetime? Only time will tell. Starless exoplanets may orbit black holes. Exoplanets are, put simply, just planets that don't orbit our sun. Recent studies have found, though, that some exoplanets, rather than orbit a star, are orbiting supermassive black holes. This is also thought to be quite common across the universe, as evidence suggests that at the center of a galaxy, the supermassive black hole can pull planets into its orbit. What's more is that it doesn't stop there, that these planets can also be formed around these black holes. Whilst it's true that black holes are never ending in the pursuit to consume everything around it, they can also form a ring around themselves. These rings are made of various gases and dust, but form anywhere up to 30 light-years away from the supermassive black hole itself. It is theorized that planets can be formed when a star forms. The cloud of gas and dust from around the star collapses and forms disks. These disks are then pulled together and merged by gravity. As you can probably put together, this new research suggests that the clouds formed around a supermassive black hole can create these disks, and potentially in turn, planets. These planets created around the black holes would be around 10 times the mass of the Earth and could be giant ice or rock planets. Also, because these planets would be formed light years away from the black hole, that there wouldn't be any strange happenings on these planets caused by the extreme gravity from the black hole. The scientists carrying out this research at the University of Kagoshima in Japan also estimate that tens of thousands of these planets could be orbiting the supermassive black holes in the centers of galaxies, and even go as far as to say this could be happening in our own galaxy too. The Japan Earth Grazer 2006. Meteors are the small bodies of matter that enter the Earth's atmosphere and become incandescent due to friction. They travel at very high speeds and appear as streaks of light. While many of the meteors hit the surface of the Earth, some meteors enter the Earth's surface in such a trajectory that is almost parallel to the Earth's surface. Due to their high speed, these meteors bounce back into the upper atmosphere and re-enter space. Such meteors are known as Earth Grazers. One of the most fascinating examples of an Earth Grazer was observed in Japan. On March 29, 2006, the citizens in several cities of Japan witnessed a bright fireball travel across the sky. Scientists in different research facilities in Japan were able to accurately measure the characteristics of the meteor. Scientists determined that the fireball was caused by a meteor that weighed approximately 100 kilograms. It had entered the Earth's atmosphere at a height of 87 kilometers, and then it covered a distance of 1,000 kilometers in only 35 seconds before leaving the Earth's atmosphere. This was only the third Earth Grazer to have been observed and measured accurately by scientists. It was widely photographed, and videos were made by ordinary people and scientists observing the Earth Grazer. The event was also widely covered by the mainstream media. It was one of the most rare and fascinating space-related events to have ever been witnessed by a large number of people. Perhaps one of the most long-standing legends in all of recorded history, and arguably the most popular tale of advanced ancient civilizations in modern-day culture. The lost city of Atlantis is one unexplained mystery that has stood the test of time. Atlantis' popularity is not limited to its philosophical roots, at least in relation to its not-so-recent adaptation as the home of the famous comic book hero, Aquaman. It is so popular, in fact, that it even has its own dedicated field of study within the realm of pseudo-history, Atlantology, accompanied by a research database known as Atlantopedia. Recorded history presents to us the story in the time of the ancient Greeks via one of the most prolific philosophic writers, Plato. Atlantis is first introduced in his stories, the Timaeus and the Critias respectively. In Timaeus, the character Critias tells Socrates a story. In this story, the character Solon, a real-life ancestor of Plato, makes the long journey to Egypt. He engages in conversation with an Egyptian priest regarding the topic of ancient history. The priest is unimpressed with Solon's stories, so he decides to educate him with a historical tale unknown to the Greeks at that time. In a summary of this tale, an Egyptian at a time long before the Athenians' own recorded history of themselves. He described Athens at this time as excelling in all pursuits of knowledge, living virtuously, and practicing moderation. He tells how a powerful nation called Atlantis attempted to overtake surrounding civilizations, including Egypt, but the Athenians were the ones who put a stop to them. Immediately following their defeat, cataclysmic floods and earthquakes swallowed up the continent of Atlantis, covering it with a muddy terrain, making it impossible to navigate the seas where the continent once stood. In the Critias, Plato writes an even more detailed description of Atlantis. Atlantis was founded by Poseidon, who fell in love with a human woman known as Cleito. Together they had 5 sets of twins, whom of which eventually came to develop and rule over the 10 different provinces of Atlantis. It is believed that as time passed, these rulers slowly divided up portions of this fabled land in order to create a legacy between each family. The Atlanteans grew to be an advanced civilization for its time, far ahead of all other civilizations surrounding it. They were known to be much more developed in maritime navigation, city infrastructure, militaristic pursuits, and even agriculture. The actual city of Atlantis is known to have been a main citadel in the center, surrounded by 6 concentric rings, 3 of water and 3 of land. In the dialogue, Plato described the city of Atlantis as being 50 states from the sea, which translates to just under 6 miles. Atlantis was connected to the sea via a canal which was 300 feet wide and 100 feet deep and ended at a harbor near the settlement. The actual continent of Atlantis was explained by Plato as being larger than Asia and Libya combined, with the plains surrounding the city being approximately 230 miles wide and 345 miles long, and with a large range of mountains at the northern end of the continent and smaller mountains surrounding the rest of the center plains. The entire continent was described as being rich in soil, plant and animal life, elephants included, and having reasonable temperatures for sustaining these forms of life. Throughout the dialogue, Plato does not cease to chronicle aspects of Atlantis down to the finest details. He speaks of the main palace in the center of the city, elegant bathhouses, temples, statues of gold and silver, gardens, aqueducts, cisterns for storing water, housing for both people and animals, guardhouses, and even racetracks. Bulls were worshipped and viewed as divine in the city of Atlantis and roamed the streets freely. Plato then goes on to describe other settlements of people in the surrounding areas of the continent, but simply labels them as wealthy farmers and country folk. Plato explains the military setup by the city of Atlantis. He goes into great detail about the various roles filled by members of the ancient city and its hierarchy, all the way from king down to citizen. Towards the center of the Timaeus dialogue, Plato writes about the Atlanteans becoming complacent in their human nature, becoming corrupted by greed and losing sight of nobility. At the end of the Critias, he writes that Zeus plans retribution for these actions, and then the dialogue abruptly ends. Like the majority of Plato's literary works, many scholars view Timaeus and Critias as fictional stories meant to relay a metaphorical message, while others view it as an actual historical account of real events that took place. Solon really was an ancestor of Plato, and could have actually visited Egypt and learned of Atlantis and then passed down the story to Plato. One argument that supports the once existing Atlantis is the amount of detail Plato used when describing this ancient civilization. Why put so much effort into describing the most minute of details just to communicate a metaphor? From the measurements of the continent as a whole down to the depth and width of with sensible details about a place that may have existed and possibly may still exist. It is not unlikely that Plato could have taken a true story that has a rightful place in recorded history and expanded upon it with an artistic approach to better execute his metaphors. Many Atlantologists that specialize in flood history recorded by ancient Egyptians, Mesoamericans, and even some European cultures also believe that Plato was describing real historical events that took place. It is widely believed that the flood that sank Atlantis is the same flood described in the story of Noah's Ark. With that being said, flood stories can be traced back long before the Bible, and many of these stories show great similarities with only subtle differences. So this begs the question, why do so many cultures have similar stories about floods? One theory is that these floods actually took place sometime around the end of the last ice age. This correlates with Plato's description of the destruction of Atlantis, as told by the Egyptian elder 9,000 years before Solon went to Egypt in 600 BC. This is where scientifically proven geological findings come into play. It has been proven that approximately 11,600 years ago, the Earth did undergo massive rises in sea level. For this theory to make sense, Atlantis would have had to have existed during the last ice age. And at the end of this era, there may have been pole shift which led to multiple natural disasters. Some researchers have speculated that some survivors of this ancient maritime civilization may have reached out to surrounding civilizations like Egypt in Africa and the Incan and Aztec empires in South and Central America, and even as far as Babylonia and Sumer in Mesopotamia and even India. All of these cultures have stories of men appearing after a cataclysmic flood event. Thoth and Osiris in Egypt, Viracocha in Inca, Quetzalcoatl in the Aztec Empire, Vishnu in India, Awanas in Babylonia, and Enki in Sumer. Perhaps these Atlantean survivors traveled to these places, and being so advanced they were accepted as gods and influenced each culture's history as such. One idea that supports this theory is the discovery of pyramids and pyramid-like structures in each of these areas. Perhaps the survivors spread their knowledge of pyramids and their alignment with the stars in hopes that future civilizations would gather the clues and solve this mystery. Another theory is that Atlantis was actually destroyed at the end of the Bronze Age. The explanation for this mix-up in historic timelines can be found in ancient Egyptian timekeeping. The Egyptians used both solar years as well as lunar years for keeping time. While solar years line up with 365 days a year, lunar years are measured in months. If the Egyptian elder who told Solon the story of Atlantis was speaking in terms of lunar years, meaning 9,000 months instead of years, this could have lined up with the end of the Bronze Age. Another real-world account recorded by the Egyptians that backs up this theory is known as the invasion of the Sea Peoples. During the Bronze Age collapse, an unknown group of people attacked Egypt and other parts of the eastern Mediterranean. They seemingly came out of nowhere from the Mediterranean Sea and invaded Egypt. A famous battle ensued, which is known as the Battle of the Delta. Egypt was, however, able to fend off the unknown attackers. Could it be that these attackers were in fact Atlanteans? At any rate, it could be true that they weren't attacking at all. But Egypt was simply defending by means of offense and recorded the battle as if they were being invaded. With that being said, and with so much other evidence supporting that Atlantis was in fact a real place, where could it be hiding? The location of where Atlantis was and where its ruins could be is perhaps the most debated topic in Atlantology. Speculations for locations vary all over the world, including but not limited to the Canary and Azza Islands, the North and Irish Seas of the Atlantic, the Spartale Bank, and Southern. There are many more. However, for this video, we are going to stick with 3 of not only the most popular believed to be locations for Atlantis, but also some of the most factually supported. The first possible location is what is known today as Danana National Park in southwestern Andalusia, Spain. The first supporting piece of evidence for this location is in fact its geological location. Plato wrote that Atlantis was in front of or just beyond the Pillars of Heracles, which is known today as the Rock of Gibraltar. This area is also believed by some to be the ancient civilization of Tartessos. This place is mentioned several times in the Bible, but instead labeled Tarshish, and is noted as being a very wealthy civilization, rich in minerals such as gold, copper, tin, silver, and iron. These same minerals were mentioned in Plato's dialogues when describing Atlantis. That Tartessos and Atlantis could in fact be the same place, but known by different names to different cultures. More supporting evidence for this location lies in the Tartessian ruins in Cantorano, due north of Danana Park. It is widely accepted that after the flooding, some survivors of Tartessos, Atlantis, fled north. Ruins of Cantorano have been discovered that somewhat resemble a scaled-down description of Plato's city of Atlantis. At the entrance of the scaled-down Atlantis lies a carving of a warrior facing 3 concentric circles. The second possible location for the lost city of Atlantis is the modern-day island of Santorini, just north of Crete. Near the end of the Bronze Age, an event known as the Thera eruption or Minoan eruption took place. This was a catastrophic volcanic eruption that wiped out the majority of Santorini, as well as caused damage to surrounding islands with earthquakes and tsunamis. At this time, a Minoan settlement resided on the island who were a dominant sea power in the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeologists have found that this settlement possessed advanced engineering knowledge, including 3 to 4-story buildings, minor earthquake-safe structures, plumbing, and sewage. The Minoans were also found to worship balls, not unlike the Atlanteans. It seems that before the Thera eruption took place, the island may have resembled the ring-like shape as described by Plato. However, this location does erase any connection with the Pillars of Heracles, if that even is the correct location of the pillars. Perhaps those survivors of the eruption fled to surrounding civilizations which could connect Santorini to the stories of the Sea Peoples or being accepted as gods amongst the various cultures mentioned earlier. The third and final possible location for the continent of Atlantis is what we know today as the continent of Antarctica. The basis of this hypothesis starts with what is known as the crustal displacement theory. In short, this theory states that the Earth's crust shifts similar to the skin of a grapefruit moving around its soft interior. This theory is supplemented with other theories such as continental drift and the previously mentioned pole shift theory. Evidence supporting crustal displacement include excavated remains of woolly mammoths found in North America. Upon discovering these creatures, researchers found that the contents of their stomachs was shown to be food that would be found in warm climates, suggesting that they were frozen faster than they could escape death. Further evidence supporting Antarctica to be the location of what was known as Atlantis can be found on the map made in 1513 by 16th century cartographer Pierre Rees. He is believed to have accurately depicted the northern coastline of modern-day Antarctica before it was covered with ice and before it shifted south some 2,000 miles. Other maps that support similar coastlines of Antarctica include the Orontius Finis map of 1531, the Cadaz Atlas of 1569, and the Philippe Bosch map of 1739. Each of these map markers were said to study and go off of previous maps. Is a common practice in cartography, including Pierre Rees. That means that there had to have been a source map for him to study and replicate. Is it possible that an advanced civilization advanced in seafaring technology provided a map to the world? Perhaps as the Earth's crust was displaced, survivors fled to the various civilizations in order to preserve their advanced knowledge, culture, and possibly maps. Palm leaf fossils have been found on Antarctica, indicating that at some point in the Earth's history the continent did lie further north and was capable of inhabiting flora. Plato did say that Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia together, which would make sense in regards to how large Antarctica may be without the icy coverage. However, modern-day researchers have pointed out that seafarers in ancient times often rather than actual area size. Applying this to the actual length of Asia and Libya's coastal lines from the eyes of mapmakers in ancient eras, the land size of the continent of Atlantis may have been closer to the size of Cyprus or Sardinia. It is also widely accepted by researchers that what we know today as Asia and Libya may have been labeled incorrectly by ancient Greek writers. An example of this might be referring to the Kingdom of Lydia in Turkey instead of Asia, or instead of Libya they were referring to a landmass near the Nile Delta. Recently, aerial images have been captured of several concentrically shaped structures throughout Antarctica. Could it be possible that these structures are ruins of ancient Atlantean empires? Until we learn more, Atlantis will remain an unexplained mystery of the world. Red Square Nebula. In April 2007, NASA released images of a massive celestial object located in the constellation Serpens. This red-colored bipolar nebula is located in the same area of the sky as the star MWC 922. Scientists named it Red Square Nebula because of its color and shape. The images of the Red Square Nebula were taken using the Mount Palomar Hale telescope. This massive object is estimated to be located at a distance of 5,000 light-years from Earth. The unique nebula has fascinated scientists because of its symmetrical shape. According to Peter Tuthill, an astrophysicist at Sydney University, Red Square Nebula is one of the most symmetrical celestial objects ever imaged. Researchers are unsure about the exact composition and the origin of Red Square Nebula. However, most of the researchers believe that the massive star MWC 922, located at the center of the nebula, is responsible for its existence. According to Peter Tuthill, many stars that have a low mass, like the Sun in our solar system, get rid of their outer layers in order to produce stunning planetary nebulae. Researchers believe that this dying star is ejecting gas and dust into the surroundings, creating the nebula. It is believed to be a bipolar nebula formed as a result of the material emitting from the opposite sides of the star. The twin brother experiment, definitely seen as one of the strangest findings discovered on that of the International Space Station, are the tests conducted by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to better understand the effects of long-term space inhabitation that was given the name of the twin brother experiment. The experiment was referred to as the Twin Brother Experiment due to the fact that NASA scientists sent up an astronaut of whom had a twin brother that they could use as a comparison of information compared to the astronaut brother of whom would be spending close to a year in space. After his time up in space, the astronaut went through a battery of tests to show any kind of differences, degradations, or changes in his overall anatomy to help explain the effects of long-term space habitation and prepare for eventual long-term space travel or colonization efforts. After using more than 10 different research teams to conduct experiments on measuring large numbers of metabolites, cytokines, and proteins, the research study found a strange effect that space had on gene expression. The teams found that though 93% of the genome from the brother that was in space returned to normal upon landing back on Earth, there appeared to be changes in more than 7% of his DNA that led to changes in the health of his immune system, bone formation networks, hypoxia, and hypercapnia. This meant that after the one-year mission, the twin was more than affected by the cosmic radiation in space that led to dramatic changes in his gene expression as well as manifested illnesses in his life. These changes didn't revert back to normalcy for another 6 months after landing back on Earth and leads many to believe that it could very well be possible to have permanent genetic damage due to longer exposure to cosmic radiation. Regardless of the shielding of the capsules and the effects zero gravity have on the astronauts aboard the ISS. Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. The largest known structure in the observable universe is Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. This unimaginably massive object is a galactic filament comprising of a vast group of galaxies bound by gravity. This massive cluster of galaxies is estimated to be about 10 billion light-years across. Astronomers determined the size of the gigantic structure by mapping the gamma-ray bursts emitted from it. Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall was discovered in November 2013. It exceeds the size of huge LQG by more than 2 times. Astronomers detected 19 GRBs from the structure. The gamma-ray bursts were discovered in the direction of the Hercules and the Corona Borealis constellations. Therefore, the structure was named the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. According to John Aquila, one of the astrophysicists behind the discovery of Herc Great Wall, the structure is larger than the theoretical upper limit on how big the universal structures can be. But the discovery of this structure has truly confused scientists about the cosmological principle. John Hercules believes that there is still a chance that sooner or later astronomers will find a structure even bigger than the Herc Great Wall. Scientists believe the size of the observable universe to be approximately 93 billion light-years. This means that the Herc Great Wall that spreads approximately 10 billion light-years across is about 10% of the observable universe. Another mind-blowing fact about this gigantic structure is that it is located at a distance of more than 10 billion light-years from Earth, and it is believed that it came into existence only 3 to 4 billion years after the Big Bang. Researchers believe that this gigantic structure consists of billions of galaxies. This means that there could be potentially trillions of stars and planets within this gigantic structure. The chemical and biological possibilities that lie within this structure are endless. Exoplanets located in TRAPPIST-1. Discovered within the TRAPPIST-1 system that made headlines from all around the world, TRAPPIST-1. D was one of the many exoplanets found orbiting a star very similar in heat and size to our own Sun that led many research scientists to believe that many of the planets orbiting around the Sun to be Earth-like habitable planets and ideal for future colonization of a solar system. The most exciting prospect of this discovery was not only the planets, however, but rather the distance the system is from our own solar system, being only a mere 39.6 light-years away from us, making it an interstellar neighbor with a much easier point of access. In fact, previous efforts in developments of space technologies such as that of the Orion nuclear-powered spacecraft could see the journey to the TRAPPIST-1 system met in as little as 1 generation of passengers and accomplished in a short 60 years. This very well means that efforts could be started right now to begin interstellar colonization with current space technologies without any additional stress of developments already being performed. The TRAPPIST-1d planet in orbit around the Sun-like star of the TRAPPIST system also appears to be cooler than that of our own Earth and far richer in composition of precious metals, a rocky surface, a low gravity for easy takeoff, and an atmosphere filled with. However, given the planet's size, mass, and density, it is theorized to have a weak electromagnetic field which would not help to shield colonization efforts from damaging cosmic radiation, similarly seen on our neighboring planet Mars. But even if the planet turns out to be incompatible with future colonization efforts once the passengers arrive at their destination, It can easily be cannibalized for resources to build megastructure bases capable of supporting human life and assist in the efforts of terraforming and colonizing the other neighboring planets nearby. The closest neighbor to the TRAPPIST-1d planet, TRAPPIST-1c, is seen as the best candidate for future human colonization efforts that require next to no additional research developments in the realm of colonization. The short distance of the interstellar neighbor, along with all the raw resources that can be gathered by the neighboring planet, is only the first bullet point as to why TRAPPIST-1c is a prime candidate for colonization. Back in 2016, researchers found that the planet has a temperature that is very similar to Earth, with a maximum surface temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature similarly seen in areas on Earth such as Death Valley. Additionally, TRAPPIST-1c has a gravitational force that is 97% equal to that of Earth's gravitational forces, making it habitable without risk to the health and wellness of colonizers, as well as a mass large enough to support a strong electromagnetic field that can shield colonizers from deadly cosmic radiation. This makes it a prime environment worthy of colonization efforts, as the size, atmosphere, electromagnetic field, and mass of the planet seem to be an almost perfect mirroring of our very own planet. Recent research also believes the planet to have a rich atmosphere of water vapor that could potentially see the planet slightly cooled enough to have surface temperatures similar to that of Earth. 18 hours before impact. It was discovered by Richard A. Kowalski, who was working at Catalina Sky Survey, a telescope in Arizona, United States. The meteor exploded 37 kilometers above the Earth's atmosphere. The energy of the explosion was measured to be equal to that of a 0.9 to 2.1 kilotons of TNT. A large fireball was created as a result of the explosion. According to media reports, the light from the explosion was so intense that it lit up the sky just like the full moon. An airliner that was traveling 1,400 kilometers away from the explosion reported seeing a very bright flash of light. After the explosion, scientists started searching for the torn-apart meteorites. 15 meteorites were discovered within the first 3 days of the explosion. After analysis, the researchers concluded that the asteroid TC3 belonged to a class of asteroids known as F-class asteroids. Researchers found amino acids on the collected meteorites, and they concluded that the source of the asteroid was most probably another planet in our own solar system. One of the pieces of the TC3 asteroid was gifted to Richard Kowalski, the scientist who discovered the asteroid before it had entered the Earth's atmosphere. According to scientists, it is not uncommon for asteroids of such a size to hit the surface of the Earth. In fact, 2 or 3 such asteroids hit Earth. Meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs. Scientists believe that about 66 million years ago, one of the most catastrophic events in the Earth's entire history took place. Researchers have found abundant geological evidence of an asteroid hitting the surface of the Earth and causing massive destruction. However, the most conclusive evidence was discovered in 1978 when geophysicists working for an oil company discovered a massive impact crater underneath the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The crater is located near the town of Chicxulub, and therefore it has been named the Chicxulub crater. Subsequently, the asteroid that created the crater was also named the Chicxulub asteroid. Over the years, a number of research studies have been conducted to determine the various features of the crater and the asteroid that caused it. It is estimated that the crater is 150 kilometers in diameter and 20 kilometers in depth. The crater goes quite deep into the continental crust. Researchers believe that the Chicxulub asteroid was approximately 10 kilometers in diameter. As this massive asteroid hit the surface of the Earth, it caused a massive explosion, resulting in Earth's atmosphere being polluted by a huge amount of debris. This severely altered the Earth's climate and caused the extinction of more than 75% of species that existed on Earth, including dinosaurs. Some evidence has also hinted that a massive tsunami was also triggered as a result of the explosion. Researchers are still trying to get their heads around the climatic conditions immediately after the meteor impact. Further research is being carried out in order to better understand the mix of dust and various gases that engulfed the planet after the impact from the Chicxulub asteroid. Water found on the Moon. Scientists have often attempted to theorize the contents of the Moon as well as its surface materials ever since the beginning of the Cold War space age, and efforts to retrieve lunar material were made. There was hope that the moon would prove to be a far more capable life-bearing body as it is the closest celestial body to our home planet. However, evidence retrieved from the moon after the original moon landings proved that this original assumption. Unlike our planet, the moon is not protected by a magnetic field of any kind and is constantly bombarded by a significant amount of helium-3 as a product of solar wind radiation. It is this constant bombardment that would lead to the lack of any life-bearing developments on the moon of any kind, including any attempt at finding naturally occurring water on the surface of the moon. However, recent satellite imaging has provided what the National Aeronautics and Space Administration has referred to as unambiguous data that shows evidence of large reservoirs of water on the surface of the moon. The satellite evidence, published in the September 25th issue of the journal Science, provided details that residing deep in lunar craters that are permanently shadowed from solar radiation. There are large pockets of ice that could store enough water to allow for the establishment of permanent lunar bases. The existence of these ice craters provides evidence that the water molecules on the moon are incredibly mobile, allowing them to find their way to the craters and pooling at the bottom. In fact, planetary geologist Carl Peters claimed if the water molecules are as mobile as we think they are, even a fraction of them, they provide a mechanism for getting water to those permanently shadowed craters. This opens a whole new avenue of lunar research, but we have to understand the physics of it to utilize it. Not only does this discovery have profound implications for lunar research and planetary geology, but it provides enough evidence and support for the establishment of lunar colonization that could see itself in use within the next few decades, as NASA has been working on their Moon to Mars mission that will use our orbital satellite as a launching point for rocketry and further colonization of the Martian surface. First radio broadcast. Though its influence in history has been astounding, the small broadcasting device we know as the radio has not been around for very long. In fact, its inventor Nikola Tesla did not first conceive of the idea until 1885. Despite the young age of the device, it was made apparent that Mr. Tesla was far ahead of his own time when first coming up with its invention. Being the only inventor of his time, be made aware of the electromagnetic spectrum and the ability to tap into its powers and uses. Oddly enough, Tesla wrote extensively in his notes that when he made the first radio capable of receiving and broadcasting his signal, as soon as he turned on the device, he could already hear another person's voice on the other side. He would later go on to claim that the people transmitting him a signal were those of beings living on the surface of Mars, and that they were attempting to make first contact with him. This was only made more eerie as Nikola Tesla wrote that this voice was that of a man calling out his name, saying Tesla 1, 2, 3 over and over again before the signal cut out entirely. Many researchers speculate that the signal could have been nothing more than background radiation misinterpreted caused by a solar wind of the sun. However, many believe that perhaps something far more creepy could have been going on in the background. No explanation for this strange occurrence has been provided, and still many speculate that perhaps Nikola Tesla made contact with something not quite human. Ranging from extraterrestrials to time travelers, the conspiracy theory community seems hell-bent on trying to discover the root cause of Nikola Tesla's first received broadcasts. Is time travel possible? This question has to be up there with why we are here and is there a God? If time travel is possible, then who on earth wouldn't want to try it out? In theory, we are all traveling in time, just not in the way that you or I would think of it. As humans, we are traveling at 1 second per second, so yes, we are traveling in time. The thing is, we want to travel faster than 1 second per second, and that is what we think of as time travel. There are actually discrepancies between time at altitude and on Earth due to the difference in gravity. An airplane traveling in the air will actually experience time around a second slower than you will standing on Earth. This principle also applies to the way GPS works. According to a leading time travel researcher, William A. Hiscock, a professor of physics at Montana State University, traveling into the future is definitely possible, but there is a big maybe hanging over traveling into the past. The way in which time travel would theoretically work is by using something called the time dilation effect of special relativity. This tells us that a clock appears to tick slower the closer it gets to the speed of light. Hiscock further explains how if you were to board a space rocket and accelerate continuously at 1g, which is the acceleration that would produce a force equal to the gravity at the Earth's surface, you would reach near the speed of light in around a year. If you then continue to accelerate to the speed of light, the time dilation effect of special relativity would come into play and time would slow down on board the ship. With these factors in place, a round trip to the center of our galaxy and back to Earth would take around 40 years in Earth time. However, due to the center of the galaxy being 60,000 light-years away, 60,000 years would have passed on Earth and hence you would have time traveled. This also happens to astronauts if they have a twin sibling. If this were true for somebody who had traveled to space, they'd actually return so slightly younger than their twin. Now, even though all this is actually possible in terms of physics, the engineering practicality of it all is not practical at all, which is why it's unlikely we'll be time traveling anytime soon. In terms of going back in time, things get a little bit more complicated. Wormholes is one of the ways that we could explore the past, however you can't simply find a wormhole and step through it, which again presents a problem. Stephen Hawking proposed a theory called chronology projection conjecture, which essentially is a sciencey way of saying that nature does not want us to go back in time. In other words, the past does not want to be changed. There's lots of loose ends when it comes to our understanding of space and how we can make our wildest fantasies into things that are a lot more real than a Hollywood blockbuster. Sadly, we aren't quite at that level of understanding yet. But as time goes on, science will only further develop and we may be closer or further than we think from these answers. When the ancient Greek civilization first journeyed to Egypt and laid witness to its incredible methods of construction, megalithic structures, advanced cities and technologies, and incredible strides in mathematics and philosophy, not only were they completely intrigued by this, but they quickly worked to try to classify what they saw and provide it with the names we know today. When the ancient Greeks came across the large stone structure that depicted a lion with the face of a man, reminding the Greeks of the stories of the Sphinx recorded in the struggle of Oedipus, they quickly named the structure the Sphinx as an ode to their own culture scene in the Egyptian culture. However, outside of this original encounter, nothing else was known about the strange structure. In fact, new evidence and research today has found that it could very well be possible that the Sphinx structure itself is far older than supposed Egyptian writings and documents proclaim it to be. So, today we will be going over this evidence regarding the Sphinx and asking ourselves the question, does the Great Sphinx of Egypt predate the Egyptian civilization itself? One of the main reasons for why the Sphinx has been dated its current age of being only 4,511 years old is not due to carbon dating or other reliable efforts made to accurately measure its date, but rather because of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics and documents that detail that the Sphinx was supposedly created during the reign of Egypt's 4th dynasty. Unfortunately, it was recently discovered that these documents could very well not be legitimate and that the pharaoh of the 4th dynasty forged them for the sole purpose of taking credit of another past pharaoh's work. A common practice amongst pharaohs to rewrite history and take the honor of a past pharaoh's lifelong efforts. This was discovered not by taking a closer inspection of the Sphinx, but rather discoveries made in the tombs of long-deceased kings of Egypt. Originally a theory posited by the groundbreaking author Robert Temple, there appeared to be overwhelming evidence that the Sphinx we know today was actually an attempt made by a pharaoh of the 4th dynasty to do nothing more than to claim the works of those before him. Evidence for this can be found when analyzing the head-to-body ratio. In fact, the head on the Sphinx is so small that many had often believed upon first sight that it could have been grinded down from a much more massive structure. The second piece of evidence is provided by the hieroglyphics located at the Temple of Tepchuf that outline in great detail that the original god of ancient Giza was Anubis, and the accounts and images of Anubis in his jackal form are drawn all throughout the site in the same pose as of the body of the Sphinx, with no mention of a lion of any kind at the ancient city. Interestingly enough, this exact same pose was discovered in one of the only tombs of an Egyptian pharaoh ever discovered that had been completely undisturbed since his burial, the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Within King Tut's tomb is a shrine to Anubis that demonstrates an exact scale of the Sphinx statue, but with the head of a jackal to represent Anubis, showing in overwhelming evidence that the original statue at the ancient city of Giza was supposed to be that of a jackal-headed Anubis and not that of a lion body with a human head. So where do we get the idea of a human head and a lion body? The truth is, the only reason why the statue is referred to as a sphinx is because of old Greek mythologies such as those of Oedipus that talk about a lion with the head of a man called a sphinx, but no such symbol exists in that of ancient Egypt. This means that the hieroglyphic texts that describe the Sphinx with a human head to represent the pharaoh of the 4th dynasty was nothing more than a forgery by the then pharaoh to take credit for a great statue of which he had not created or designed. In fact, a pre-dynastic pharaoh gives a great account about providing his royal dog a grand burial at the site of ancient Giza. In this text, his argument for why he had such a royal burial for what has been speculated to be his guard dog was due to his want and need to have the dog buried before the great god Anubis. Not only definitively proving that the Sphinx was originally that of the god Anubis in the jackal form, but also that the structure itself was created during the pre-dynastic times, long before any pharaoh could claim ownership of its creation. This could very well mean that not only was the creation of the Sphinx older than that of the dynastic reigns of Egypt, but that perhaps the structure is older than the Egyptian civilizations themselves. Further evidence of this theory can be found when analyzing the recent archaeological finds of strange bones discovered all throughout ancient Egypt. It is well known amongst Egyptologists that the ancient Egyptians treasured animals of all kinds, believing them to be the representation of their gods. It is due to this obsession that strange structures and bones from animals all around the world, even from areas previously believed to not have been operating open trade routes, have surfaced all across ancient Egyptian cities. Described as Egyptian zoos, strange hieroglyphics and designs have come forward showing evidence that not only were the early Egyptians capable of owning strange beasts from around the world, but that they possibly possessed an extinct species of woolly mammoth. Dubbed as the world's first zoo, a 6,000-year-old ancient Egyptian cemetery was uncovered filled with the remains of wild animals from all around the world that should have been unable to collect from the reaches of early man for thousands of years to come. Skeletons of ostriches, crocodiles, leopards, and other exotic animals were found alongside pools of water, large fenced-in cages, and a potential animal hospital filled with removed molars, teeth, claws, and evidence of animal surgeries. Though the importance of animals regarding the Egyptian religion was widely known, the evidence of the global reach of the species available to them, including species long believed to be extinct, has been a mystery that even the most elite of archaeologists and Egyptologists have failed to explain. This is although mostly due to the fact that it is widely believed by historians and archaeologists all around the world that the oldest civilization to exist was merely 10,000 years old. However, evidence in the fossil record shows that the modern-day intelligent human has been around for more than 50,000 years. So why is it then that the oldest cities don't start appearing until the past 10,000? It might have to do with the evidence of the extinct animals recorded at Egypt. The woolly mammoth was one of many distinct megafauna that went extinct at around the same time in the fossil record, merely 10,000 years ago. These extinct species included the mastodon, short-faced bear, the giant ground sloth, and many others. In fact, when Charles Darwin first visited the areas near the Galapagos Island when he originally discovered the ground sloth bones, they were so fresh that he believed them to still be a living species of megafauna, proving the recency of their extinction. So why was it then that around 10,000 years ago all of these species went extinct? Partly due to three strange reasons: large fires, a massive flood, and a sudden ice age. The evidence for these three events are widely known by archaeologists and research scientists found in the fossil record that showed that all around the Earth appeared to be massive fires that were followed by a rapid cooling event that only took about 4 decades, as well as certain events being hit by numerous tsunamis and large flooding. Many experts had originally speculated that perhaps a massive meteorite strike could have caused such a phenomenon, but no large craters supporting the theory had yet been discovered at the time of the original publications. However, this year, a massive crater underneath an ice sheet in Greenland shows a tremendous impact point where a meteor could have hit, generating more than 700 megatons of force. So much force, in fact, that it would have been equivalent to 140 fully efficient nuclear strikes, using the S-Air bomber nuclear warhead, a nuke capable of not only breaking the stratosphere, but generating enough dust and debris in the air to cause a full-on nuclear winter. Any human civilization at the time, regardless of how advanced, would have been completely wiped off the face of the Earth in such a massive meteor strike. All of this happening at not only around the same time as a massive extinction event, but also around the same time the oldest civilizations would have been constructed. Could this be evidence then that perhaps the pyramids and the Sphinx, as well as many other advancements made in megalithic structures and creations, could actually more accurately come from the efforts of human beings from before this catastrophic event, and the Egyptians were merely the surviving peoples to pick up where humanity left off? Given the incredible advancements we have made in the past 10,000 years, this could very well mean that the humans before the event could have been significantly more advanced than we are today. And the old stories of gods and kings could very well have just been the technological advancements before humanity had to reset due to such a catastrophic tragedy. Vladimir Kovalyanok witnesses a UFO explosion. Vladimir Kovalyanok, a Russian cosmonaut and Air Force general, claimed to have seen a UFO on a space expedition on May 5, 1981. He is not the first cosmonaut to have seen a UFO. In fact, there are multiple space explorers who have reported seeing UFOs traveling extremely fast through space. So if there are multiple people who travel into space and see UFOs with their very own, how can we cease to hear about it? There is a simple explanation. Nobody believes them. UFOs have been so mystified in Hollywood and in the media that we believe a UFO must be accompanied by a small green alien. And even more, the presence of such UFOs and aliens must entail some kind of abduction. Of course, most of the space explorers don't ever claim to be seeing aliens or even conclude that the UFO is filled with aliens. They simply report seeing an unidentified flying object. Vladimir Kovalyanok's UFO sighting was a bit different. As his spacecraft flew across Africa towards the Indian Ocean, he reported seeing a disc-shaped object surrounded by fog in the shape of a cone. This object was flying near him when suddenly it changed directions, exploded, and then exploded again. Kovalyanok reports seeing two different explosions, one after the other, resulting in two spherical figures of gold and white smoke. The white smoke, he said, seemed to be holding the two objects together. Soon the mysterious flying object he saw disappeared under the Earth's shadow, and he never saw it again. Kovalyanok is adamant that the spacecraft he saw explode and disappear was controlled by intelligent life. Although he didn't report seeing any little green aliens, he stands by the fact that something was controlling the spacecraft he saw. His reports were not completely dismissed in Russia. Kovalyanok was a prestigious cosmonaut who spent 216 days total in space over the course of 3 different space missions. He was an extremely brave and intelligent asset to the Russian Space Force, and his legacy as a space explorer continues today. The Vampires of Crogland Grange. Though originally believed to have been nothing more than a published fictitious short story, there are many now living in the area of Cumberland, England, that believe that the stories telling of the Vampires of Crogland Grange to have been a real-world account of an actual witness encounter. According to the legend, a woman and her 2 brothers visited the town of Cumberland and rented an older house away from other neighbors for a small fee. With many claiming it to have been abandoned for quite some time, the 3 family members stayed there for quite a while and became accustomed to the location. It was not until the summer months that the family began to realize that something far more sinister was lurking in the area around the house. According to the legend, as the woman was sleeping, a strange creature entered the house through the window and bit onto the neck of the woman. The creature was described as having a brown face and eyes that glowed like tiny flames. Shortly after biting the woman on the neck, she awoke and began to scream for help as she jerked away from the creature attacking her. This led to her brothers quickly entering the room with a gun, believing that an intruder had entered. Unfortunately, the monster had already jumped out of the window when the sister began to scream, and so the brothers quickly followed it as it ran through the nearby forest and towards a local cemetery. As the creature ran in the distance, one of the brothers shot towards the creature and believed to have hit it in the leg before it scurried into the cemetery. As the brothers stood outside the cemetery, they had believed that perhaps the creature had been a vampire and so decided to wait until the morning before entering the cemetery and battling the creature. That morning they entered the crypts and discovered a body with a fresh wound in its leg that appeared similar to the gunshot wound inflicted by one of the brothers, and so burned the body. Though many still regard the legend as being proof of a vampiric entity, many others believed that perhaps the creature had been that of a ghoul. A ghoul is known to reside around cemeteries as they can take the form of any person that they devour. Additionally, ghouls are described as having burning eyes of fire similar to that of the jinn. Could very well be that the creature was in the process of turning into the woman but was stopped in time by their brothers taking action. Voynich manuscript is one of the most elusive and famous pieces of literature in all of recorded history. Handwritten in an unknown language or code, the manuscript features copious amounts of text, illustrations, and diagrams. The subject matter of the drawings range from various unidentifiable plants, diagrams of constellations, zodiac symbols, and even nude women bathing in oddly shaped pools. The manuscript was brought to popular attention by Wilfred Wojniaks, a Polish Samogitian book dealer who the manuscript was unofficially named after. He purchased 30 manuscripts from the Collegio Romano in 1912, who were selling parts of their library due to lack of funds. And the Wojniaks manuscript just happened to be one of the 30 manuscripts Wojniaks purchased. Wojniaks was perplexed by the strange yet fascinating book and spent the next several years in search of scholars, cryptographers, and codebreakers who could potentially decipher the manuscript. During this time, Voynich himself focused his efforts on attempting to trace back the origins of the book. He believed that finding past owners of the manuscript would help to uncover its author or authors and possibly even decipher the book's unidentifiable language. Before diving into the physical and visual contents of the Voynich manuscript, much like Wilfred Voynich, it can be helpful to attempt to trace back the book's previous owners in order to better understand its history and possible purpose. The earliest owner the Voynich manuscript has been traced back to is from the late 16th, early 17th century in the court of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, who was also king of Hungary, Croatia, Bohemia, and a member of the Habsburg house throughout various points of his life. Rudolf's reputation varies depending on who you ask, but it is commonly accepted that he was very much devoted to the arts, both popular and occult. In addition to collecting art, he was known to collect rare weapons, botanical gardens, exotic animals, obscure literature, and even dwarves. He was known to have giants in his army, let a lion roam freely about a section of his castle grounds, and had a deep fascination of cryptography and alchemy. At some point during his reign, speculated around 1586, Rudolf was believed to have purchased the Voynich manuscript from an unknown party for somewhere between 300 and 600 gold ducats, the former most likely. In today's currency, this could be valued from anywhere between $1,000 to $14,000, an extremely high amount for any piece of literature, but was speculated upon due to a letter found in the manuscript later down the ownership timeline, which we will revisit shortly. At some point during Rudolf II's reign as king, his court was accompanied by alchemists John Dee and Edward Kelly. Some researchers believe either Dee or Kelly to be the selling party, or even the authors of the Voynich manuscript, due both to their attendance of Rudolf's court at this time, as well as an entry in John Dee's diary, 1586, in which he writes about comeuppance of 300 ducats from an unnamed source. Upon Rudolf II's death, many of his belongings were passed down to various members of his court, including the Voynich manuscript. Exactly who the manuscript was given to at this point is still up for debate. It was either received by Rudolf's personal physician at the time, a man named Marzizi. Either would make sense due to the subject matter of both biology, medicine, and plant life within the manuscript. The former was the likely owner at this time, as Wilfred Voynich allegedly found Jacobus' name written in a corner on the first page of the book, although it did not resemble his handwriting. At any rate, the book remained with one of these two parties for approximately 20 years. The next owner is unknown. But at some point in the mid-17th century, the manuscript came into the possession of Czech antique collector and alchemist George Barris, the first confirmed owner of the Voynich manuscript. Barris unsuccessfully spent many years attempting to decode the strange book. Eventually, Barris learned about a Jesuit scholar who was extremely well studied in physical sciences such as geology, biology, and medicine, as well as cultural studies and linguistics, such as Egyptology and Sinology. Little did Barris know, this man was Athanasius Kircher, one of the greatest polymaths to ever live. Barris discovered that Kircher had successfully deciphered a large amount of Egyptian hieroglyphs and even cartographed a supposed map of the lost continent of Atlantis. Barris reached out to Kircher, sending him handwritten copies of the manuscript along with letters in 1637. 1639, the latter of which was preserved. Kircher did not reply but was fascinated by the script. He reached out in an attempt to obtain the real copy of the manuscript, but Barris did not oblige. Upon George Barris' death, the manuscript was passed to a man named John Merrick Marcy, not to be confused with the aforementioned botanist, Marcisi, a Bohemian doctor, and Marcy spent some time with the manuscript, but later concluded it would be better off in the hands of his longtime friend and colleague, Athanasius Kircher. How ironic! At this point, the year was 1666 and Kircher studied at the Collegio Romano in Italy. Marcy sent Kircher the manuscript along with the letter stored inside the manuscript, which was still inside the book when purchased by Wilfrid Voynich nearly 300 years later. The letter from Marcy states that the manuscript was apparently authored by Roger Bacon, a 13th century philosopher and astronomer. His reputation was very highly regarded by those who studied alchemy at this time, so his authorship was not entirely irrational. The letter also reads that Marcy's friend, Bohemian lawyer and writer Raphael Najovsky, who also served under Rudolph II, claimed that Rudolph purchased the manuscript for 600 gold ducats, perhaps D and Kelly split this amount, and the deal was made sometime before 1611, perhaps by German book dealer Karl Weidmann, who was known to sell books to Rudolph in the late 16th century. In the end, Athanasius Kircher was unable to decipher the Voynich manuscript and came to the conclusion that the text was a universal language, maybe at some point understood by the entire world's population, or perhaps meant to be understood by all living and non-living beings and objects. This claim is largely conceptual and often disputed because although Kircher was an accomplished polymath, his decipherment of the Egyptian hieroglyphs were later found to be incorrect. Upon Kircher's death, the Voynich manuscript remained in the library of the Collegio Romano for the next 200 years. In 1870, the Papal States were annexed by Victor Emmanuel II of Italy. The government chose to take much of the church's property, including some of the Collegio Romano's library. Before this happened, some of the literature was transferred to various faculty members at the time, including Kircher's collection, which held the manuscript. The book was acquired by Petrus Beck, the then head of the Jesuit order and rector of the Collegio Romano. His library was then moved to Frascati, where it was housed until 1912 when the 30 manuscripts were purchased by Wilfrid Voynich. Upon Voynich's death, the manuscript was passed down through various family and friends of his, and in 1969, while in possession of Hans Kraus, the book was donated to Yale University, where it is still housed today, in the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library under call number MS408. Although much of the Voynich manuscript's background has been at least partly uncovered, much of the book remains a mystery. In 2009, the manuscript's vellum, a type of paper, was dated back to the 15th century, sometime between 1404 and 1438, using radiocarbon dating. Scholars believe it could have possibly been written in northern Italy during the early Italian Renaissance, and the language could possibly have Turkish or Hebrew origins. The manuscript itself consists of approximately 240 pages, some of which fold out to show large illustrations, and many pages are missing. Because the text is unreadable, the manuscript has been split up into 6 sections based on the varying illustrations and assumed subject matter. Number 1, Herbal, 112 pages. This section contains 1 to 2 illustrations of plants and flora per page, accompanied by paragraphs of text. None of the plants are 100% identifiable. 2. Astronomical, 21 pages. This portion is made up of circle-shaped diagrams similar to those found in the fields of astrology and astronomy. Some of these diagrams show stars, suns, and even moons. One collection of diagrams shows 12 symbols for the zodiac constellations, as in a pair of fish for Pisces, a bull for Taurus, and so on. 3. Biology, 20 pages, also referred to as the anatomical section. This portion is made up of large blocks of text with various smaller drawings, mostly of nude women bathing in pools or tubs connected to elaborate plumbing systems, which were later believed to resemble various human organs and body parts, namely those of the female type. 4. Cosmological, 13 pages. This portion is made up of more circular diagrams, similar to those found in the astrological section, but far more obscure. This section contains a popular fold-out illustration known as the Rosette's Folio. This fold-out shows 9 islands connected by what appear to be causeways, accompanied by what may be castles and a volcano. This part is made up of isolated plant parts, such as roots, leaves, seeds, and so on. Drawings of what appear to be apothecary jars are also present, accompanied with text. 6. Recipes, 22 pages. This section is full of pages of text, but broken into step-by-step sections. Some pages are text only and therefore uncategorized. One of the biggest mysteries behind the Voynich manuscript lies in its purpose. Although still unknown, many experts believe the book was meant to serve as a pharmacopoeia, or a technical book covering subject matter like medieval sciences, early modern medicines, and even alchemy. Other researchers believe the solution behind finding the manuscript's purpose lies in the path of finding the true author. Some of the more popular theories for who created the manuscript include Roger Bacon, John Dee or Edward Kelly, Giovanni Fontana, or Wilfrid Voynich himself. If Roger Bacon did indeed write the manuscript, it would make sense that John Dee at the very least sold the Voynich to Rudolph II, as Dee was known to have a large collection of Bacon manuscripts. However, none of Dee's diaries mention Rudolph even once. Others believe Dee and Kelly created the manuscript on a whim in an attempt to acquire some easy funds from Rudolph and started the rumor about Bacon being the true author. Other researchers believe the same to be true about Wilfrid Voynich. Being an established book dealer, one can assume a book by the great Roger Bacon would be worth a great deal of money, and he could have fabricated the letters found inside the manuscript. Although the vellum was carbon dated, the ink was not. Another theory was that 15th century Maggie Italian engineer Giovanni Fontana was the true author. Many of the illustrations in the manuscript bear some resemblance to some of his other works, and in his book, Secret of the Treasure Room of Experiments in Man's Imaginations, Fontana talks about using encrypted languages along with ciphers used to decode them. While some seek to find the manuscript's creator, others focus on attempting to decode the text within its pages. It is believed that the text is either a code-based message that needs to be deciphered by using some type of letter-based or number-based cipher, that of which has still not been found. Others believe the text are actually coded messages, whereas one would use a stencil to cover up portions of the page. Reveal characters from an actual known language, blocking out the noise text. The issue is, there could be a different stencil required for each page, which could have been made randomly on a whim by the author when the manuscript was written. Some researchers have found that much of the text is actually made up of commonly used shorthand, often used by scholars during that time period. Upon recreating the text into full language, the contents did not make much sense, likely ruling out this theory. There have been a number of people throughout time claiming to have decoded the manuscript, however none have been 100% confirmed. Perhaps the Voynich was a medicine book written in a lost language by a lost civilization, or maybe its contents come from outside of our Earth. It is also a possibility that the book is complete nonsense, used to get some quick cash. Until more history is uncovered or code-breaking technology advances, the Voynich manuscript will remain one of the most unexplainable literary mysteries the world has ever seen. The Ghost of Longleat House. Lady Louisa Carteret was known during her time for dressing in nothing but gray and gray clothing. It is most likely due to this that the appearance of a gray-dressed woman roaming the halls of Longleat House have time and time again surfaced in reports made by visitors of the house. The legends say that the lady was madly in love with her footman, of whom she described as being the most devout and loyal servant to have ever existed, of which sparked a jealous outrage from the husband. In a fit of rage, the husband had the servant killed and then buried underneath the house with not another word given on the matter. Lady Carteret at the time was told that the servant ran away with a few precious jewels and had vowed never to return. Unwilling to believe the lie, the lady spent every day searching through the house, looking in rooms of which she was forbidden to visit all across the massive estate, in the hopes of finding the servant tied up or restrained against his will. It appears that her ghost is still searching for the servant to this day, as many have often reported seeing the ghost speeding past them into different rooms at different times of day. Additionally, Longleat House is even known for being the site of one of the most compelling instances of a haunting court on tape that still has many video experts poring over its creation with extreme precision. It appears that not only is the footage genuine, but that the figure of the apparition matches that of Lady Louisa Carteret, a piece of evidence that has helped to keep the myths surrounding the house alive and well even in the modern. On the evening of September 19, 1961, married couple Barney and Betty Hill were traveling home from a vacation to Niagara Falls in Montreal, Canada. They had been driving for much of the day and were nearly to their home in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. While passing through just south of Lancaster around 10:30 p.m., Betty noticed a few small but bright star-like spots of light in the night sky. They moved from below her perspective of the moon upwards to the left, and then to the right across the face of the moon. At first, Betty assumed it was some sort of falling star, only the star moved in ways she had never seen before. She watched as the lights traveled in a sporadic and unpredictable movement, while they also appeared to grow in size and luminosity. Eventually, Betty convinced Barney to pull over to get a better look at the anomaly, which he only agreed to because their dashing Delcy needed to be walked. Using binoculars, Betty claimed to see that the source of the flashing lights was some kind of aircraft, one of which she was unfamiliar with. In the past, Betty had heard rumors of reported UFO sightings from her friends and family, so her mind immediately assumed this was what she was experiencing. When Barney got a look through the binoculars, at first he deduced that the supposed UFO was a commercial airplane en route to Vermont. However, after some time observing its truly acrobatic-like movements, he considered it to be some sort of top-secret government testing and did not want to believe the possibility of it being some sort of extraterrestrial UFO. This startled Barney enough to urge the family back into the car to continue driving on their route home, which was nearing a pass through the mountains. As they continued driving, the Hills recalled the UFO remaining in their field of view, coming even closer than it was before. Barney almost felt like they had been targeted by the craft and it was following them. As they neared a familiar picnicking area known as Indian Head, the UFO descended so close and so rapidly to the Hills' car that Barney abruptly stopped the car in the middle of the road. The craft now hovered in front of them about 100 above the car, taking up the field of view of the windshield. They recall it being flat and wide in shape, and it appeared to be rotating. Barney stepped out to have a look, first retrieving his pistol from the trunk of the car and holstering it within his pocket. He stepped away from the vehicle and then recalls feeling compelled to peer through the binoculars up towards the craft. He then observed anywhere from 8 to 11 human-like figures that moved with robotic, almost German soldier-like efficiency. They appeared to stare back at him. And although far away, Barney was able to see they were wearing what appeared to be black uniforms. In the next moment, all but one of the figures moved away. The one remaining appeared to be at a desk or terminal of some sort, and Barney assumed they were the leader. Barney then received a message, either verbally or pathetically, that said, "Stay where you are and keep looking." Due either to fear or an unknown force, Barney was seemingly unable to take the binoculars away from his eyes. In this moment, he was convinced that the beings aboard the craft were not human. The craft then continued to lower about 60 feet above him and 300 feet away. Fin-like structures then protruded from the craft and began to telescope towards him. At this point, Barney was in such a state of shock that he found the strength to tear the binoculars away from his eyes, in turn breaking the leather neck strap. Near a state of hysteria, he returned to the car, warning Betty that he thought they were about to be captured. The craft proceeded to move directly above their car, and Barney tore off down the road. Next, they heard what sounded like a rhythmic pattern of buzzes or beeps coming from the trunk of their car. The entire car began to vibrate, and tingling, almost numbing sensation passed through their bodies. In the next few moments, their memories became spotty and both experienced states of altered, unaware consciousness. Huge series of buzzing sounds they heard another, and the two returned to their normal, coherent states of mind. They were still in the car, and it was surprised to find they were nearly 40 miles from where they last remembered. When they finally did return home, they noted that it was much later in the night than they had expected to return back. It was nearly 5 in the morning. After the initial sighting of the craft, they had apparently lost about 2 hours of time after the event. They did recall making a sharp, unplanned turn into the woods and then coming upon some sort of roadblock and observing a fiery, glowing ball of light in their path. After getting some rest, the Hills awoke in the early afternoon and immediately noticed some out-of-the-ordinary sensations and bodily impulses. Barney found the broken leather neck strap from the binoculars, however he could not recall how they broke. Betty insisted that their luggage be placed at the side door rather than the front for fear of some sort of radiation from the event. Barney, who is known as a meticulous dresser, found his dress shoes from the ride home were scuffed, scratched, and basically ruined. Betty found the dress she was wearing from the night before to be torn and tattered at the zipper and hemline. There was also a strange pink powder-like substance on the dress that blew away when hung on the clothesline. She also insisted on taking a long shower to wash away feelings of contamination, and Barney felt compelled to inspect his private parts in the bathroom but found nothing unexpected. In addition to this odd behavior and discoveries, the couple also found that neither of the watches they wore from the incident worked any longer. The Hills tried to reconstruct their memories of the events from the night and early morning, but they had seemingly lost time. They remembered the initial encounter, but after the buzzing sensations, their memories were fragmented. Betty, against Barney's request, informed her sister of the incident. One of her sister's neighbors was a scientist, and he suggested they try placing a compass near their car and belongings and record the results. Barney came to find small concentric circles on the trunk of the car, and the compass needle would whirl around rapidly when placed near them. Being an interracial couple in 1960s United States of America, Barney did not want to bring their experience into public attention. Although they were both highly respected, dignified, and intelligent people within their community, the state of racial tension within the U.S. simply did not favor interracial relationships at the time, and Barney was wise to keep unwanted tribulation out of their lives. He also feared they would be labeled as lunatics for even mentioning an encounter with possible extraterrestrial life. Approximately 10 days after the incident, Betty claimed to have been having several vivid dreams for 5 nights in a row. They occupied her mind constantly throughout the day, and after those 5 nights, they never returned. She proceeded to document the dreams for future reference. In one, she dreamt that Barney and herself were driving in their car at night and was stopped when they encountered a roadblock and several men surrounded the car. In the next instant, 2 small men were leading her against her will through a path in the forest. She noticed Barney behind her and cried out to him, but he was in some sort of trance. She estimated the captors in her dream were just over 5 feet tall, wearing dark blue military-style uniforms. She noticed their human-like appearance, but with gray skin, blue lips, and dark eyes. The hills were led into a disc-shaped craft, like the one they remembered encountering, and they were taken into separate rooms, which she protested against. She was spoken to by their leader and an examiner, and they both spoke very broken English, which she could hardly understand. She was told their bodies would be tested to compare the differences between the hills and them. She was placed into what reminded her of a dentist chair, and the examiner examined her head, including her hair, ears, mouth, teeth, then other parts of her body, like her hands, fingernails, legs, and feet. He then unexpectedly inserted a needle into her navel region. This caused Betty an intense amount of pain, and the leader responded by waving his hand over her forehead, and the pain went away. After the examination, Betty began a conversation with the leader, and she was offered a book. The book was filled with symbols she had never seen before. The leader said she could keep the book, but then an argument broke out among the creatures and she was unable to. Against Barney's wishes, Betty ended up reporting their incident to the Peace Air Force Base, and they were followed up with for a long-form interview. The report was eventually sent to the U.S. Air Force's UFO research team called Project Blue Book. During the interviews, the Hills talked about having some form of amnesia during a certain time period of the experience. This was the first case involving a UFO that was accompanied with missing time. The Hills were then referred to Dr. Benjamin Simon, a Boston psychiatrist well-versed in hypnotism. They agreed to undergo a series of hypnosis sessions. However, Simon insisted they be separate for their sessions in order to keep each of their stories separate. During Barney's sessions, he became nearly hysterical, describing his overwhelming feelings of fear and helplessness during the whole ordeal. He then recalled events nearly identical to Betty's dreams, as well as exams on his male reproductive organs. Betty's sessions were similar, with the added fact that during the abduction she had asked the beings where they were from, and they showed her a 3-dimensional star map. They asked if she knew where she was located on the map. She did not. They explained it would be too difficult to explain. Simon concluded that the pair had suffered some form of unknown trauma, but their stories were simply made up from Betty's dream. At any rate, the therapy calmed their anxieties from the event. Betty made a sketch of the star map, and at the time it was not an existing star map. In 1969, astronomer Marjorie Fish was intrigued by the story and constructed a more detailed map from Betty's sketch. Closely resembled the double star system known as Zeta Reticuli, hence the other alias of this incident. Perhaps the Hills were abducted and studied by aliens from the Zeta Reticuli system, or perhaps they made the entire thing up as a publicity stunt. However, the latter is unlikely due to their position in society at the time. Either way, this incident had massive impact on pop culture at the time and inspired many to come forward with claims of extraterrestrial encounters that were to come. The Hills were said to be dignified people and not the kind to make wild accusations, especially about something as controversial as aliens. The mystery remains unsolved and likely will remain unsolved unless more evidence comes to light. Carroll A. Deering. The Carroll A. Deering was built in Maine in 1919. It was the last ship to be ever made by G.G. Deering Company, and it was designed to carry large amounts of coal. On August 22, 1920, the ship set sail to Rio de Janeiro with Captain William H. Merritt, his son Sewell, and a 10-man crew. A few days into the trip, Captain Merritt became very ill. They made a stop in Lewes, Delaware, so the captain and his son could get off, and they were replaced with Captain Willis B. Warmell and Charles McClellan. They made their way to Brazil and delivered the coal without any problems. While in Brazil, Captain Warmell visited another captain and told him he didn't trust the crew on the Deering. He had many concerns with them and he only trusted the engineer, Herbert Bates. When the ship reached Barbados, Captain Warmell spoke with yet another captain about how troubling his crew had been, especially McClellan, who treated the rest of the crew badly. The captain he spoke with, along with two others, heard McClellan say that he would get Captain Warmell before they made it to Norfolk. While sailing through a storm off Cape Thea, the ship lost its anchors and chains. On January 29, 1921, the Deering came to the Cape Lookout lightship and tried to radio for help, but the radio at the lightship was out. Thomas Jacobson, the lightship's keeper, said someone tried using a megaphone since the radio was out, but the man had broken speech and didn't seem to act like an officer. He also said the crew was going around on the quarterdeck where crewmen usually weren't allowed to be, and they also seemed confused. 2 days later, C.P. Brady spotted the Deering from the Cape Hatteras Coast Guard station. The ship was stuck with its sails still set on the edge of Diamond Shoals. Due to bad weather, rescue ships couldn't get near it until February 4th. By the time the rescue crew got to the ship, it was taking on water and had been abandoned. Strangely, almost everything inside the Deering was damaged, but it didn't seem to have happened completely by accident. It appeared that the binnacle box had been forced open and broken with a sledgehammer found nearby. The ship was missing various things such as navigation equipment, life rafts, and the crew's personal items. They also found food left on the stove, leading them to believe they were preparing food at the time the ship was abandoned. The Deering was damaged beyond repair and was destroyed. The government launched an investigation to find out what happened, but no official conclusion could be made. The ship had been sailing away from any bad weather and there was no evidence of piracy. Many believed there may have been a mutiny, which would explain the man Thomas Jacobson saw trying to get help. They also considered the idea that when the ship got stuck, the crew got away on lifeboats and were swept out to sea. None of the crew was ever found and neither was any wreckage or lifeboats. The story of Carol A. Deering is one of the most popular mysteries among sailors. It is now often referred to as the ghost ship of the Outer Banks. Many people have theories about what happened, but it is likely that no one will ever know the truth. Sally at Seven Angels. In July of 1984, cosmonauts on the Soviet space station Salyut 7 reported seeing a strange orange light. The space station was suddenly surrounded by the light, and it even came through the walls of the station. The light was so bright, the crew temporarily went blind. Once they regained their vision, they looked through the portholes for the source of the orange light. Since the Salyut 7 had experienced fires and other types of emergencies already, but they found nothing of the sort. Instead, the cosmonauts claimed to have seen 7 angels floating around right outside the station. They said the angels looked similar to humans, but with wings and halos. The angels stayed close to the space station for another 10 minutes, then they disappeared. Just a short time later, they saw the same orange light. The light surrounded the space station and they saw the angels outside again. This time, the crew said that the angels were as big as an airliner. The Soviet Union decided that this discovery should remain top secret and they ordered the crew not to tell anyone what they saw. Some tried to dismiss these claims by saying that the crew were hallucinating. After all, they had been in the space station for 155 days when they first saw the angels. So they were stressed and probably exhausted. Some believe hallucinations could have also been caused by a lack of oxygen and pressure fluctuations. But how could they all have the same hallucinations? This also doesn't explain how the second crew saw the angels since they hadn't been there long. It has also been suggested that similar sightings have been secretly reported by many other Russian cosmonauts as well. Christopher Columbus Bermuda Triangle UFO. The mysterious happenings at the Bermuda Triangle area are not a recent phenomenon. When Christopher Columbus made the historic journey to North America, he experienced some very strange events in the Atlantic Ocean, especially in the Bermuda Triangle. Christopher Columbus reported about the compass pointing in the wrong direction while passing through the Bermuda Triangle. He also reported mysterious waves rising without any wind. However, the most shocking thing that Columbus and his men witnessed was an unexplained light rising from the ocean and levitating on the horizon. The unexplained UFO baffled Christopher Columbus. The light seemed to be moving across the horizon at a slow pace. Then suddenly it rose up and disappeared into the sky. At first, Columbus thought that the light was coming from land and that they had finally made it to their destination. However, after a while he realized that this faint light that seemed like a small wax candle was moving and rising. There have been a number of theories about the mysterious UFO lights seen by Columbus and his men over the Bermuda Triangle. Some historians believe that it was most likely that Columbus and his crew saw a meteor. Some people believe that it was the phenomenon of bioluminescence and the light was glowing due to bacterial activity. Another theory suggests that Columbus and his men were very close to land and the light was actually coming from land. However, none of these theories explains the mysterious candle wax type appearance or the strange upward movement of the light as described by Columbus. The Doga figurines of Japan made during the ancient prehistoric period of Japan that goes as far back as 16,000 years ago. The Doga figurines have fascinated theorists and the ancient astronaut community as hard evidence of the existence of extraterrestrials during the times of our ancestors. The Doga figurines depict small humanoid creatures that appear to be visually similar to that of the small gray alien sightings of the modern era. The purpose of the Dogu are widely unknown, but they have been found all around the Japanese island and have consistently dated to be somewhere around 14,000 to 16,000 years old, which is 4,000 to 6,000 years before the first human civilizations began to arise. Many members of the UFO community believe that these small figures could be evidence of extraterrestrials influencing the ancient past given their remarkable similarities between modern-day sightings. Hollow Moon. On November 14, 1969, in an attempt to better understand the makeup of the moon, NASA placed multiple seismic readers across its surface and then soon launched a lunar space module on a collision course for the moon. The idea behind this theory was to allow the lunar module to strike the moon with such a dramatic force that it would send reverberations and specific frequencies throughout the entire core of the moon, and allow the seismic readers to capture this data and help to accurately map out the inside of the moon. What they soon discovered was baffling. Original theories and hypotheses had suggested that these reverberations would not last longer than a minute, given that the surface of our moon is covered in mostly basalt, which would work to absorb these reverberations and, given its extensive presence, was believed to make up the majority of the mantle of the moon at this time. It was mathematically calculated to prevent the seismic activity from lasting for a prolonged period of time. However, as the lunar module struck the moon, the entire celestial body began reverberating for over an hour. NASA scientists describing its reverberations similar to that of a church bell ringing. There is still no reasonable hypothesis for the cause of this today, and no further information can be gathered given NASA's lack of future missions to the moon. The most legitimate theory available at this time comes from the works of Russian researchers Michael Vassin and Alexander Shabakov that had posited the artificial moon theory. They began to notice that the craters of the moon, regardless of the impact size or diameter, all equaled out in depth. They also noted that these craters generally had very shallow and flat interiors and in other areas even containing convex bottoms. They hypothesized that meteors are hitting an armored hull underneath the basaltic surface of the moon, preventing further depths into the celestial body and believing the moon to be a possible spaceship created by a complex alien life. This theory was only reinforced as the mathematics for the moon and its density became an apparent issue. Given its size, location, and theorized general makeup, the moon should have a density of roughly 5.5 g per cubic centimeter. However, given its orbital path and overall physics, we find the moon to only be 3.3 g per cubic centimeter, causing the moon to be significantly less dense compared to our Earth despite theories of the moon's creation coming from the materials of the Earth. Also soon began becoming connected to the strange anomalous properties of our moon. The moon is too big to have naturally been caught into the orbit of our planet. For comparison, our moon is 2,159 miles in diameter, whereas the largest Martian moon is merely 14 miles in diameter. This has led to a wide array of debates among the scientific community as to its formation, and even recreations and simulations of impact theory have proven ineffective and mathematically implausible as to the formation of our moon. Strange coincidences have also occurred. Our moon has the perfect diameter at the perfect distance to create a perfect solar eclipse. The odds of this naturally occurring are astronomical and have led to further questions as to the viability of our moon naturally forming. But what do you make of these interesting discoveries? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.